And love seats.
Welcome back to another live stream for the A Song of Ice and Fire reread. We've already began the banter. We've already began.
It is not a reread, Jimmy. This is my first time reading this.
Oh, really?
You big liar.
Oh, well, this is
read
wonderful.
it either.
Yeah, I knew Alex hadn't. I didn't. Atlanta, I thought you had.
I'd only ever read up to Dance with Dragons.
Oh, this is great. This is going to be really fun. For some reason, I thought we talked about this before.
I came here tonight hoping you would explain this book to me.
I can't promise that I stay down here this whole time. This is mighty
Alex.
awkward. What?
Alex, stay in the chair.
What?
Yeah, can everyone tell Alex, just give him some support in the chat.
Tell him you will leave if he gets out of that chair.
His Charles Dance chair is wonderful, and we're trying to get him to utilize it more. Because by sitting in the chair, it means he's automatically correct.
I mean, you should just assume that I'm correct always anyway. But now, because now I have to hold my mic like an asshole.
Or you could hold your mic like a gentleman. It's your choice to hold it like an asshole.
That's actually true.
Now it's just like I'm just gonna put it right here. There you go. This is what you get now.
Just block your face. Oh my
Oh,
god.
Zippy, welcome. She said, "Hello there, beautiful people. I'm excited for this live because I love the book and Dunkin' Egg." Absolutely.
I mean, I was low-key not kidding when I said I need you to explain this book to me, because the whole time I was reading it, I felt like I had entered the class mid-semester and was like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, it's an interesting book.
It's just just take it for what it is. It's short stories in the same
But I just
universe.
felt like all the time there were so many names, and I was like, I think I'm supposed to know what this means, and I don't know what this means.
So, hey, someone knew exactly what I was wearing. How odd. Ben, good call out. It is the MeUndies
that just means
Game
that
of
Ben
Thrones
has it too.
onesie.
Oh, I think I have seen the boxers that match that in my Instagram
wearing them.
ads.
I'm not going to show the crowd, but I am wearing them.
Can we just point out real quick that Jimmy clearly paid for StreamYard to have a Dark Souls background?
Hey, how did you know, man?
Gotta respect it.
Hey, I had to do it because I wanted to get started with Berserk. I wanted to have a custom Berserk background. And I was like, well, I might as well just do them all, you know.
Why don't you have A Song of Ice and Fire background is the real question.
Because my friend Matt, who is Super Gains Bros, hasn't made me one yet. But once he does, I will use it. I've been really leveraging my creative friends because, folks, the thumbnail for this, which I think is really nice, Liana made it. And thank you, Liana. I appreciate it because I was very stressed.
Can we stop using the drunk-looking Alex picture, please?
I love that picture.
Well, you can send me a different picture, Alex, but until you do, that's the one I have.
Fine.
Mrs. Duncan the Tall, who is the certifiable Dunkin' Egg expert, says, Lana, did you feel thick as a castle wall?
I mean, yes. I felt like Podrick Payne.
Dunk the lunk. Thick as a castle wall. The repetitive nature of that throughout the story is my favorite. And honestly, folks, if you're not well behaved, you will get a clout in the ear. That will happen.
Oh my god, they said that so many times.
It's so good. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he ever actually ends up giving him a clout in the ear. It's always it's an empty threat. If I'm not, I might be wrong. Miss Duncan the Tall can correct me on that.
I don't think Dunk ever hits Egg now.
No, and Dunk in a lot of ways. I guess we can kind of talk. Let's do a general overview, and I should probably shut up first. Liana, your first time reading, what did you think? How'd you feel about it?
I feel like I want to know what's happening because then I will like it a lot more. But right now, I feel like the parts that I didn't understand, I was like, these are fun stories. But most of the time, I'm just like, I wish the parents would explain to me what's happening.
So what was actually confusing about you, though? Just where this all fits in, or just
Well, I was gonna say, because I just feel like the stories themselves are quite simple, right? Mm-hmm. So just the who Dunk and Egg are and the actual plot arc of the individual story. But I just feel like the thing that is probably making these stories is all of the ways this is connected to the world of Ice and Fire. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that I'm just like, ooh, Stark, I know that name. Targaryen, I know that name. But otherwise I'm yes. I feel like this is all extremely significant and very ooh, this has potential ramifications for whatever. And I'm just no idea.
Yeah, all the genealogies of this, some of them are really connected and it's really, really cool. Some of them, not at all.
Yep.
And it's interesting that GRRM actually has these thought out to this point where he actually has lines of families going back this far. I first time I read this, I actually didn't love it. And it was whenever I wasn't I was reading the books, but I wasn't super invested in them yet. So I was real confused by all of the names. But it's weird. like you said, the stories are very simple, but there's like a lot to dive into. And thematically, I think that this is almost like a kind of explainer for the whole series, like even the 5 books of like what it's really about. And a lot of it does come down to like families and how people treat lower born people or bastard born people. And what does it mean to have a heritage and have blood with someone, which we kind of see, and we can talk about it more when we talk about the 3rd story. But yeah, I don't blame you at all.
I was gonna say, but it felt like if I had like picked up Sharp Ends, except not known that it was part of First Law, and just like without ever reading First Law, had picked up Sharp Ends, and I'd be like, "What is any of this?"
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think that that's totally fair. Like I've heard more than one person have that experience, and GRRM loves his names.
Also, the first story, like obviously not where it ends up going, but like so much of the setup of the first story was literally A Knight's Tale, the movie.
Yeah,
and I love that movie. So.
I think GRRM does too. I think he's actually said
also
that
Mark
before.
Addy, who plays Robert Baratheon, is one of the main characters.
That's right.
Knight's Tale.
I watched Knight's Tale for the first time
so good.
with my in-laws. First off, I love that movie.
So
but when I saw babyface Bobby B walk on the screen,
fantastic.
I lost my mind.
See, for me, when I first watched Game of Thrones, I was like, "Oh my god, that's the guy from A Knight's Tale."
It's so funny how like that flips, like depending on which one you watch first. You know, it can be like people like Charles Dance, right? Like people probably know him as one thing and we know him as another. It's kind of hilarious. Alex, what did you think? How did you feel about this in your first read through?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was because it's familiar enough because it's A Song of Ice and Fire. So you do know like house names, you know a lot of like obviously who Dunk and Egg are going to be, and then it's different reading what felt like just a totally different kind of writing compared to A Song of Ice and Fire because it's so much more, I guess, like lighthearted in a sense, and
so much more narrow.
For sure, it's very much more of like a small character work rather than this big like we're gonna have 30 POVs and everyone hates each other and everyone's trying to kill each other. And it's like there's definitely some of that happening like in the background because you hear about things or they like the book kind of tells you things as you go, just like that are happening in the background with other families and the Targaryens being assholes and stuff like that. But just dealing with this kind of like father-son relationship almost between Dunk and Egg is just adorable. And Egg's just so lovable, and it's like a nice little Game of Thrones story before he becomes who he becomes.
Yeah, and
it's
like
also very cool to see a world in which the Targaryens are in power because that's all stuff of well, not legend because it's quite recent history, but like there's never a point in the core books that you see a world in which they are the rulers. It's always that was like how things were very recently, but not anymore. So to see a world in which they are actually like going around being princes and kings and that they're in charge is like, I don't know if it's weird or cool, but it's something.
I think it's cool because he could have very easily said these are the Targaryens, but like as we saw in Hedge Knight in the first entry, there's a lot of Targaryens and they're all vastly different from one another. And I'm sure I'll mess up the names more than one time, but Aerion's a complete dick.
That's what I was texting you guys. Like, damn, all Targaryens are just assholes, aren't they?
Yeah, and then you have I think it's Darion. Someone can correct me, but he's the drunk.
Egg isn't an asshole, and he's a Targaryen.
But he's like hiding.
Well, he's a Targaryen,
and
he's a bald Targaryen.
Where Egg ends up in the end is so tragic and sad, and we'll talk.
Wait, I think Alex's theory is that their evilness is in their hair.
Exactly,
that silver hair makes them evil.
Just cut it off.
But see, he becomes a conqueror and he grows his hair out. I'm telling you, it's all in the hair.
Wants to know if you two listen to. I know Liana did. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which like I liked his narration, but he does murmur and mumble a lot.
Yeah. It was specifically in the 3rd story. There were so many times he was talking like this, and I was like, "What?" He kept doing it. He was talking like Dunk, and then there's an inner voice. And I was like, "Dude, you got to stop." I had my sound up so loud, and I couldn't hear shit.
Well, I was gonna say like he would murmur, and then he would also just like I don't know if he's like because I've seen him as an actor in a lot of things, and if he's just he kind of is soft spoken, and when he's talking at a normal pace, like in a normal dialogue, then you can understand what he's saying. But when he's like doing the whole story, and I speed it up. And he would just it was just like so soft that it would just kind of all like blur together, and I would have to replay it so many times. It's like, wait, what did you say? Wait, what?
Yeah, I think he's really good at narrating battles. Whenever he's doing the fight in the water during Sworn Sword, Really, really good. And it's something that Jonathan Keeble does very well for Cornwell. And I would put Harry Lloyd up there as far as like escalating his voice. Yeah, his voice is so soft. It is soft, actually. He is pretty soft spoken. I don't know if you guys knew this, but they've made graphic novels of these, and they're so badass.
I haven't seen the graphic novels. There are
But
a
also,
ton of
like,
illustrations in the book, though.
That just now was like a word from our sponsor, except it's just him being
Now
like,
a
I have
word
another edition.
from our sponsor. I have A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I have the Subterranean Press, and then I have these. And I was just flipping through, but you can see like these illustrations are pretty sick.
Yeah.
And if folks are interested, I think Amazon still has. They're not that expensive. I don't think they're like $12 or something.
What's the?
But they don't match.
You said Sub-President edition.
Sub-President edition, but it's a rib. It's the exact same one as the hardback you get from Barnes and Noble in a sleeve. That's basically it.
That's garbage.
Yeah, it sucks, but I bought it because it was a little bit cheaper than everything else signed by GRRM, and I wanted a piece of his work signed because I knew I'm never going to meet him. The one thing about these, for people who are curious, the first two match, and then they changed the third one because they're stupid. And the third one is one, the cover's not nearly as good, but secondly, it's hardback. It's not even the same size. So, rip. For all my collectors,
if you could just get them to reprint the first Law graphic novels, that would be great.
Yes, I would love to own those. They are very expensive.
Yeah, because they're not in print.
Yeah.
But like what? Because it's very popular First Law is now. So like, why not reprint it anyway? Sorry. Okay, back to A Song of Ice and Fire.
It never takes you long.
I already wrote a fabric with sharp ends.
So we kind of talked about like this story is more narrow and stuff, but it's interesting because there's actually still a lot packed in here, and not just an exposition of names, but whenever you start thinking about the characters and who they are and how they might have played a role in the history that we kind of have an idea of that end up playing out.
I mean, all the parts that I felt like I wasn't getting. Yeah, those parts are great.
Like Rowan Weber, like the spider. She is actually Tyrion's great grandmother, which is really interesting. So it would have been Tywin's grandmother. Because she marries Eustace at the end of story number 2, but he ends up dying, and then she marries Gerald Lannister, I believe, which is Tywin's father. No, Tywin's grandfather. Sorry. So that's like a huge connection, which is pretty interesting. And then there's obviously Dunk the Lunk gets around, and Dunk the Lunk and Brienne are very paralleled in these stories. Even the fights that happen, like the fight in the river in book 2, Brienne and Jaime in the books, not in the show, but in the books, fight in water.
I was gonna say, I mean, like Egg kind of reminds me of Pod. So like, and Brienne.
Yes.
And...
Yes, absolutely. And it's 3 letters, obviously.
Do you think that's why at the very beginning of this, they said before Podrick Payne and Tyrion Lannister, like he like specifically name drops Pod?
I guarantee.
Really? That's who you're going to mention?
It almost has to be, because Podrick is so in some ways like so unremarkable. It has to be like kind of a nod, right?
It's because Podrick is a secret Targaryen, obviously.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, it's obvious after reading these stories. I'm going to connect it all. But even the way that Dunk ends up winning in the Hedge Knight, which is much more flea bottom tactics, right? Where he's smashing the prince's face in. That's how Brienne actually ends up being Loras Tyrell as well. And when we first see her ever. So in Dunk's first fight we ever see him in, he's doing the same tactics as Brienne. There's a lot of
he even mentions that it's like not very knightly to fight that way.
Well, and that's like the question throughout all these stories is like, what's it mean to be knightly? Because the story opens up and has one of the best opening lines of all time, right? I absolutely love it. It's, it was raining, so the ground was easier to dig into, and you're like, what? Why is he digging a grave? That's crazy. And then, it's sad, but the truth of the matter is Dunk is never knighted. He's lying. Yeah. And that's not a noble thing to do, but we see throughout the story, he's the most knightly guy there is. He could arguably be one of the only heroes in any of GRRM's stories. So, I
mean, most of the other Hedge Knights are kind of shitty, and most of the actual knights are even worse.
I mean, Prince Arion, he's a dick, right? And he's supposed to be, this noble figure or whatever.
I think in general, throughout all the books in the World of Ice and Fire, I think George R.R. Martin is just interested in questions of like, okay, so what does it mean to be noble? And then also, is it worth it to be noble? Like, is that actually like an ultimate, like, unqualified
he clearly tears
good?
Down nobility constantly,
yes.
Especially knights, because people wear it as like a like a
But I
badge
mean,
of
like,
honor,
even
but they
with
like use it.
even with actual honorable or quote, I mean, I guess you can argue if they're actually honorable, but people like the
Mhm.
Starks, because
Yep.
he sets up someone like Ned is like, okay, so this is pretty unquestionably like an honorable character, and then is like, but is that even that? Is that good? Like, is that actually a
Yeah.
good way to go? Is that actually help anybody?
Yeah, and a lot of people feel as if, like people always say that the Song of Ice and Fire exists to subvert Tolkien and all the classic fantasy, but it's more about not even like subverting the fact that there can't be a hero, but what is a hero. And Dunk would not be considered your prototypical hero. He's not the smartest. He might be the strongest. He could be.
I mean, he's pretty
He's the
massive.
He is the tallest. Damn it.
He's like 7 feet tall.
But I think so a lot of the things that he's deconstructing are titles, nobility, family heritage. Like, what's it mean to be overtaken by your, like you were always what's the word I'm looking for?
Predisposed.
Yes, thank you. To be evil, right? Or is it nature versus nurture kind of conversation? It's a little more on the nose here, but I think thematically that is what A Song of Ice and Fire is all about, and it's a lot more digestible through Dunk and Egg, while still having some really cool stuff.
Well, I think it's also, I mean, if it's subverting anything, and not just in these stories, but in general, because I mean, obviously Joe Abercrombie is specifically subverting Tolkien. Like he said, he's like, that's what he's like. Literally, this arc, I'm gonna do the reverse of that. Whereas, like, that's not what A Song of Ice and Fire is doing. No. Like, there's like some subversion of similar ideas or similar archetypes, but I feel like there's a lot of traditional fantasy and myth and folklore that is all, to do with someone who looks like they're born in obscurity or covered in dirt, but then like their inner princeliness shines through, and that's how you come to learn that they're actually like the long lost prince, because like you can't hide that kind of virtue, can't hide that kind of beauty, whatever. And so then it's always that the blood will out, and that like that there is something special and different about nobility, and that like even if they're like hidden, like King Arthur or Aragorn, that shines through and they come back to their rightful inheritance, whatever. Versus stories like this where you can find nobility and squalor, and you can find like idiocy and corruption in nobility, and that like subverting that idea more.
Yeah, and we're all a lot more alike than we think. It doesn't really matter what you're wearing or what your title is, but people can be terrible either way. I think it's really telling of Dunk whenever he's burying Sir Arlen, and he couldn't throw dirt on his face. That's such like a little detail that's like, God damn it. And then Mrs. Duncan the Tall, of course, points out that he was punished unfairly for eating the pie. And it wasn't me. Well, it doesn't matter anymore. So sad, dude.
How many times have you read this one, Jimmy?
I've actually read these more than the main series because of the audio. So this is probably like time 6 or 7.
To be fair, it's a lot shorter.
It's way shorter. And I like genuinely love these stories as comfort. Like Hobbit, those are the things I kind of reach for whenever it's like we're driving home for Christmas to see my family or something. Like we'll throw those on.
Bedtime stories with the children.
Yeah, I mean,
Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
We kind of said that this is a little more lighthearted, but there's a lot of like brutal stuff that does happen in these, and part of me was
lighthearted like, for A Song of Ice and Fire
for George, but part of me is like, I kind of want to read these to my kids one day, but I'm like, what age? What age do you read them?
I mean, it's definitely more lighthearted because you don't have shit like the Red Wedding happening.
Yes, and there's a lot. There's not really any sexual violence that I can remember happening, and a lot of the tongue-in-cheek stuff is like kind of slid in there.
Yeah,
even some of the innuendos are very subtle, and kids wouldn't pick up on it. So I think you could probably make an argument that like, I don't know, like an 11, 12-year-old could probably read this and be okay.
Right, when they're right at that age where they are like, oh, it's not cool to read stories to me, Dad. Right there is the perfect age.
Let me tell you about Sir Dunk the Lunk, thick as a castle wall.
Oh, Dad, stop.
Quit clouding me in the ear, Dad.
Gather round, children. I will tell a story.
Oh, man. So, yeah, I love the Hedge Knight. It's really cool seeing Maker or Makar, however you say it. And then we have
Cowboy Mike. Sometimes Dunk and Egg is sweet and whimsical, and then Dunk will go, I bet she's spreckled all around, and then we are brought back home.
Yes, or whenever he
ends up a lot more tame than Gilly and Sam scenes.
Do not say
moist crevice. Yeah.
Oh, no, okay. A different thing.
Also,
Someone
like
about a mast.
when Dunk cuts his face in front of Weber and it like blood splatters on her face and he's like, oh, more freckles. It's like, oh, that's kind of dark, Dunk. Jesus Christ. Chill, dude. So what did you guys think of the first story of Hedge Knight? Because obviously we see Tansy, not Tansy. Oh my God. Help me out. What's the puppeteer's name? I'm forgetting already. Mrs. Dunk, you're up.
That's a good question.
What am I saying? Tansy.
I don't know, but now all I can think of is Tansy.
Yeah, I can't get it out of my head. But the puppeteer, right?
Yeah.
Not too tall for me. It's not Tansy, but it's I should have taken notes this time.
You've only read it 6 times, Jimmy.
They're saying Tansel.
Tansel. Thank you. I have my notes, but I'm Dunk to Tansel. Yeah, you're not too tall. You're just right for.
Of the puppets are so cute.
I know.
Well, she shouldn't have.
Are great.
She shouldn't have had someone killing a dragon. Because
whatever.
Because then Arion did not like that.
I'm sorry. Are you victim blaming right now, Jimmy? I'm leaving.
Hey, in my perspective, Arion's the victim. I mean, how dare you challenge me? But Tansel too tall is really endearing in the first story, and I love whenever he says, "You're not too tall. You're just right for puppets."
Yep.
It's so good, dude. I feel like Dunk is very much like George hitting on girls in high school. Like just no clue what he's doing. Like he wrote that from experience for sure.
George was like, this book is about me, but I'm 7 feet tall.
But I'm 7 feet tall and a Chad.
That is great, though. I mean, that whole scene when douchebag Targaryen just like is beating her and he's just like, I'm just going to fight this guy right now.
You know, the Tall Girl movies on Netflix?
Yes.
What they should have been as a gender bent version of Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Then it would have been good.
That could have worked. That could have definitely worked.
That would have required too much work.
So neither of you going in had read this. So did you guys know that Egg was Aegon Targaryen, or was that a surprise for you both?
I mean, once I started reading it, like I probably read it somewhere, so I wasn't completely like, oh my God, what? But no, right. I mean, when I heard about this book and its existence, I didn't know that it was about Aegon. No.
Yeah. There's like so many subtle clues that looking back on a reread that you can pick out. And it's like whenever Dunk flips, whenever he thinks he's just a stable boy and he flicks him the silver and Egg doesn't pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a farm boy would like not turn that down. They would be all
Dunk
over
even
it.
Says he's like, as soon as I turn my back, he's going to pick it up.
Yep. That's right. And he does, and he doesn't. And then there's other things like he knows like different house names and what they're up to. Like he's very aware for like a stable boy. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And I didn't catch that probably the first like 2 or 3 times I read this, but now, I'm looking at other things because there's only so much to these stories. Right. But I always thought that was after figuring out.
I didn't know anything, including that he was Aegon, but I think even though these are darker than a fairy tale normally is, they still feel like fairy tale type stories with that kind of plot arc and that kind of logic for lack of a better word. So like you expect in a fairy tale to be like, it's secretly a prince. And so then like, if that happens in A Song of Ice and Fire, the main series, like where that you do not expect, fairy tale logic, if there's somebody who's secretly somebody that's like, holy shit, versus like in a fairy tale adventure with a knight type story. And you're like, and this boy was secretly a prince. Like when I read that, I had no idea, but because it's this type of story, then I was just like, oh yeah, and he's secretly the prince. Like, oh yeah.
Yeah. and Captain Mike says, you also hear about Maekar's son going missing, which the first time you read through this, you're like, I don't know which sons, which are they? Come on.
There are so many Targaryens to keep track of. I'm always like, who is mad at who and who is whose dad, brother, cousin, father? What is happening?
Zibby says, I had a feeling that Egg is a Targaryen because I remember Maester Aemon calling his brother Egg. And there's a certain scene where Dunk notices Egg's eye color. Yeah, there's definitely hints like kind of sprinkled in, but it's a cool reveal. I like it, and this immediately gets you on the side of Egg because Egg is like annoying.
Yeah,
and you're not sure. You're like he's kind of endearing, but he's just like this little, like George. Is this all you have? Like this little character? Like what do you do? And then it turns out, he's royalty.
He calls him cousin. You're just like, what?
Yeah, you're like,
you're what now?
So I like that. And I also like that Darian comes in and is like, hey, man, I'm sorry I testified against you. My bad. But what was I supposed to do? But to do you a favor, I'm rotten at fighting. I'm going to look really gallant in the first charge. And then I'm going to get on the ground and just knock me the fuck out. Like, just cold cock me. I like a good drunk character.
He's great.
Yeah. So we see, obviously, Maekar end up killing Breakspear, which is really sad because Breakspear seems like such a good dude. And he is Egg's uncle. Yes, because he's Maekar's brother. It is hard to keep these all in order, by the way. But
sure.
His death scene is really, really sad because, he's saying, like, I'm a kinslayer. It was my mace that killed him. And Dunk's like, well, I'm just as guilty as you because he fought for my honor. And it kind of grounds the violence in the series a little bit because it shows you just like a simple kind of, I shouldn't say simple, but
it felt like a fun fairy tale adventure with like the knight who secretly has a prince, and there's like this, and then that goes down and you're like, oh, this got dark. Okay,
yeah,
wow.
really fast because you kind of just expect Dunk to, Tansel's honor is on the line, and he's going to defend it, and George kind of just takes that knife and sticks it in. And I think it's also kind of set up the fact that there's a lot of turmoil within the Targaryen family, which in a lot of ways, these three stories are all to set up the Blackfyre Rebellion in the landscape, because we know that even after the one we see fail in the third book, there's like 3 or 4 more after this. So there's clearly a lot.
If at first you don't succeed,
you got to try again. You got to keep going.
I mean, you have Egg the entire time defending the Blackfyres. Like the whole time.
Egg is such a not what you would expect from like a little royal brat, and he can be a little bit bratty. Yeah, I think even Dunk says that. Like, he can be a little bratty, but he's a good kid, through it all. But Egg is already kind of grounded, so it doesn't surprise me that he wanted to be a squire for a Hedge Knight. Like, it seems like it fits his character.
I feel like the most unbelievable part of this whole thing is that he gets permission to like take him just squiring, and I'm just like, just in no possible world would they be like, yes, endanger the life of royalty, carry on.
Yes, and that, I think that is the biggest suspension of like belief that you have to make, is because Maekar
allow it.
Yeah, that Maekar, he actually invites Dunk to come to Summerhall, and if you need any proof that Dunk's not that smart, he should have went to Summerhall. He would have had a easy life. Well, maybe not during the rebellions, but it should have been a pretty easy life, right? Would have got some land.
Like, if it had been that he invites him to come and then like secretly Dunk and Egg are like, no, we're gonna go off together, but like not tell anyone, I'd be like, yeah. But the fact that he's like, no, actually, he should come with me and be completely in danger all of the time, and he's like, you're right, better plan. Go ahead. Like,
the only defense for it is that Egg is so far from the throne as of the writing of this story. Like, he is like, I think he's like 6th in line or something. And
that is
like
quite close considering how quickly people die in this world.
The life expectancy is very low. That's true. But we see Arion get sent to list, so right there he moves up. he gets bumped up a little bit, and then obviously we'll see that a ton of things end up happening. And Aemon from the main series actually says, basically, dragon dreams are what killed all my family, and eventually that's what ends up killing Egg, which is really, really sad because you're seeing him as a boy, and he's so loving. And we'll get into that probably when I don't think it's in Fire Blood, but it's in the World of Ice and Fire. So if you guys want to do that, we can, and cry about Egg and Summerhall. But
what's cool too, though, is like, eventually if George does continue to write these Dunk and Egg novels or short stories, they're gonna get a lot more violent and a lot darker, and definitely take a turn for the worst. But what I did think was interesting about just the constant mention, I mean, it's the Targaryen symbol, but like the dragon with 3 heads, like they constantly, even in this, say like the 3 heads of the dragon, they're still dropping those same kind of like little hints that you hear all throughout A Song of Ice and Fire. So every time I came across one of those, I was just like, he said it again.
Yeah, it's like their cliches that go down through history, right? Like, I think everyone's grandparents said, we're in the end times, guys. Like, everyone says we're living in the end of times. It's like, how many end of times have there been? How disappointed have these people been on their deathbeds? But
they're also talking about the dragon eggs that were unhatched.
Dragon eggs are huge. In Summerhall, the speculation is that Egg tried to hatch dragon eggs and it went awry, and everyone basically basically dies, and then Dunk ends up saving the mother of Rhaegar Targaryen, who we know ends up giving birth to potentially Azor Ahai. Which one of the prophecies in the Dunk and Egg stories is that Dunk will have to serve the realm one day and like make a hard decision.
Yeah.
And I think I have an idea of what that might have been. It might be the fact that he saved her over Egg or something. Who knows, really? Hopefully we find out. I do think, and I might be way off, I think that it is more likely that the next book that George releases that isn't like a tabletop history book or something will be Dunk and Egg and not the Winds of Winter. I could see him doing these. They're easier to write, I think. And also Dunk and Egg is going to be made into a TV show. So
yeah.
I mean, I haven't read Fire and Blood yet. We're doing that next, but like reading this, I was like, this seems like ripe for an episodic adventure of the week TV show.
Mm-hmm. For
maybe
sure.
Makes you think of Witcher a little bit, right? Like Witcher's kind of like episodic.
I guess. Well, so I don't remember where I saw it. It was on some like Song of Ice and Fire wiki or something, maybe, where he's planning on doing between like 6 and 12 of these stories.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, when did these come out?
It's been a while.
Initially.
That's
the thing is like, I could see some of these coming out before it wins, but like I don't think he's updated anybody on like more of these being done yet. And wins, he's always just like, yeah, I'm working on it. Shut up. So it's like,
but it doesn't remind me of The Witcher. It reminds me of The Mandalorian. And
yeah, no, that's fair.
Egg is like Baby Yoda.
No, that's actually that's a good comparison. When I said The Witcher, I just meant episodic fashion. Like,
but imagine, I mean, in a lot of ways, like the bigger building story of the Mandalorian and the sort of like stoic, quiet Mandalorian character, and he's got this like very important, almost like, you know, Baby Yoda's kind of like a prince, you know, in his own like Prince of the Universe, and he keeps like stumbling into grandiose like intergalactic conflicts, and then being like, I participated, and then peace, we're moving on with other adventures. So like, you know, honestly, if the Dunk and Egg show is like the like medieval version of the Mandalorian, it could be amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
it could be.
HBO doing an episodic fantasy Hedge Knight series. I mean, I'm all the way in. This is the thing that motivates me, because I try to write. I don't do it very well, but when I read these stories, this is the kind of stuff that I would love to write. Like a longer, like Will White, I guess, kind of does this. I don't know anything about Will White really, but I know he writes like smaller stories that are like sequenced. And I think that this is the kind of stories that I'm like drawn to as someone who would like to write. But it's really hard for me to do that because I'm just going to copy this. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I could do it much better than this. This is so endearing with still having like, you know, George is really good at writing combat. And then
you see what you do, Jimmy, is you make the knight really short and his squire really tall.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Just a 7-foot tall bald child.
Sir Shrunk the Small. Is that where? Is that...
I mean, Mrs. Duncan the Tall, though, talking about Fire and Blood Part 2. It's like, Jesus, this man just has way too much shit going on.
Yeah, he had a lot of ambition and you know, the one thing I don't want to say with not enough work ethic, because the dude's always working on stuff. It's just what he wants to work on. He did mention Dunk and Egg, writing Dunk and Egg in his last Not a Blog. He didn't specifically say he was working on them, but he said he intended to write more before the show comes out. Which I think is going to be a while, like probably maybe 2025 even.
But I think, I mean, with the scope and ambition of the world and story that he has been crafting, I feel like that size of thing is paralyzing. Because like, obviously you can't write it like all in one sitting or in one day or in 1 month or in 1 year. And then when you just like are sat down and confronted with all of the threads that at some point you want to continue or finish off or whatever, that you just like, because you can't do it all, you do nothing. And I completely identify with that feeling.
I mean, I think that's why it would make more sense that the main series never finishes, but we see a lot more potentially Dunk and Egg stories and even Fire and Blood Part 2, because that's all built in history that he can fill in the gaps for. And it still has to make sense. It still has to connect, but it's not like he's trying to wrap up the main series that's become so convoluted and all over the place.
Daunting.
I mean, it's just, I couldn't imagine trying to to finish that.
I don't know if you've ever watched this old British sitcom called Black Books that's about this like misanthropic Irish bookshop owner that does not want to sell any books because then he'd have to order more, and that is effort. It's very funny. But anyway, so like there's a whole episode where he does not want to do his taxes. He will do anything to avoid doing his taxes.
Same.
And so then like he like every time he sits down to do it, he finds everything else to do. So he actually organizes the shop. He combines all of his receipts into like an elegant dinner jacket that he pastes together. Just anything in order to not do his taxes. And I feel like that's kind of like finishing A Song of Ice and Fire. Is like, I will write some short stories. I will write some graphic novels. I will do some video games. I will do anything except finish A Song of Ice and Fire.
I would be as excited for a new Dunk and Egg collection because he said he would like to release these in 3s. At least that's what he says a lot of stuff. So who knows if that's true? But even if it was
Song
just
of Ice and
one,
Fire was actually about to finish 7 years ago.
Yeah, right.
10 years ago.
And we're supposed to take him hostage in New Zealand if he had. Oh well. But I would be just as excited for some Dunk and Egg because I dislike these as much as the original story. I actually think George, I don't want to say he's better, but he really does some great stuff in short fiction, which is what he did.
It forces
sci-fi.
him to not like to do too much.
Yes.
Because like when we were reading Dance with Dragons, we're like, okay, there's just like so much you keep introducing that you're like, you need to just focus on the like
Watch
two
the
important things.
Story is not even gonna have Dunk or Egg in it. It's just gonna be, like, new characters.
You mean how like the end of the Witcher series, you're like, okay, but where's the Witcher?
The next one is supposed to be the She-Wolves of Winterfell, which is like the Stark succession drama, and supposedly, folks, Old Nan and Dunk hook up. That is it's almost everything but confirmed that
so
Hodor is
actually young Nan.
Yeah, and Hodor is supposedly Dunk's relative.
That would make sense. He's the only other tall ass character in the series.
Yeah, it's so Brienne, the ones that people speculate the most, Brienne, Hodor, and Small Paul from the Wall, because they say he's thick as a castle wall. So there's like,
what about Yellow Dick? Oh wait, he's dead. Never mind. Maybe we learn the origins of Yellow Dick. You never know.
I hope so. Was it always yellow?
Exactly. See, important questions.
I love it. I love this series so much. But yeah, another thing we're talking about is like, I think he has an idea of where the main series goes. I think that I don't think he has an outline per se, but he has an idea. Dunk and Egg, it seems like he has way more of an outline because he's actually told us where those stories will probably.
Well, you kind of have to because it does have to loop into where the world has eventually, like what we've seen.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like anytime you have a prequel, you have to know how this comes back into it.
It also has to be finished before Fire and Blood 2 because Fire and Blood 2's big climax will be Summerhall because Summerhall's so actually maybe we'll see. I don't know what the climax would be, and he's kept it secret. George had the ink blotch on the World of Ice and Fire page because he didn't want to spoil what happens in those stories. Yeah. So knowing that that's the end.
So what even happens? I mean, we're going to read it next month, but like Fire and Blood Part 1, then
it's the first half of all the Targaryen dynasty. And the big event is the Dance with Dragons, but there's other stuff in the book that's really fascinating too. And we get to see the conquest.
Where does that start in comparison to this?
This starts 300 or 500 years prior.
Fire and Blood does?
Yes.
Or this does?
Fire and Blood. This is 90 years, which is why we see a young Walder Frey in book 3, and he's a little shit, and Dunk wants to throw him down. But so
Fire and Blood at no point catches up to timeline-wise where this is.
No. Fire and Blood 2 will include a Egg.
Jimmy, why did you let us read this first when chronologically we should have read Fire and Blood
because
first?
Then we leave off with the Fire and Blood and the story it's based around. Everyone's going to be hyped up for the show. That was the idea, but maybe you were right. Also, I wanted to break from big books
because of the algorithm, Liana.
Algorithm.
Oh, I see.
Shadow ban. Morons.
Actually, I mean, I think this is not. I guess it's to do with this just broadly. But in the thing with prequels, right, is that you always know where it ends up, and so should you do them, shouldn't you do them? And how often probably the answer is you shouldn't have. But that said, like, I don't always think it's a mistake. And I know when I asked Abercrombie if he would ever consider writing other ages of First Law World, I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking of things like, I know that George is always writing things in his universe, and like, I mean, other like with like Tolkien, obviously there's different eras of like the Middle Earth that you can learn about.
And all that,
yeah. So like, I mean, plenty of authors have done that to good success. But like his like unequivocal, like he's like, I mean, I might need to pay bills one day, so don't rule it out. I might do that. But basically he's like, no, why would you ever do that? Because you know the end point, and any mystique you built up is ruined because now you've explained what happened. So he's like very against the idea. And like, I totally get what he means, because like with a lot of things that are not well thought out, you're like, okay, that did ruin it. Like that didn't help learning the backstory. So I just like, I wonder what is that difference though? Because like, I don't read this and go, oh yeah, you shouldn't have done that. And I don't read, or I don't think of like with Tolkien stuff, like, oh, that ruins it. So like, when is it a good idea and when is it not?
I feel like I feel like the bad way to do it, which spoils things, is trying to do a direct prequel that ties everything together to the main
Star
novel.
Wars.
And like, so freaking Rogue One literally ending with like the whole like, hey, get it, guys? Like, here's the beginning of the. It's like, no, you don't have to like dunk an egg. Yeah, it ties into A Song of Ice and Fire, but like this is just a part of that history. It's not like, here's how everything happened, and then we start off with a Game of Thrones. It's like, like the bad way of doing it would be like, I don't know, just doing A Song of Ice and Fire, but like 20 years before
doing
like,
Robert's Rebellion. Robert's
Yeah,
Rebellion
like-
would be a mistake to write.
because like you already, I don't know, like you could still do it and make it cool, but like that's, I guess, less interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because like this way you could just do pretty much, there's so many different stories that he could just pull in, and like ultimately you know where it goes, but it's not like, here's the history of the Starks and the Lannisters and the Freys. It's just like they're there.
I guess it also depends on like what the main story was trying to accomplish. Because like when I asked about it, like about First Law, that I wasn't thinking, oh, let's do the 10 years preceding the blade itself or whatever. I was like, there's characters like Bias who are like very, very old, like hundreds, like not a mortal lifetime. So that like, if you saw hundreds of years ago, but that's the tie-in, that it's someone like Bias that we see currently, but like some other thing that maybe he mentioned in passing, some like other kings that he's mentioned that, were around and what they did, or things like that we would actually see those stories. And I know that specifically Joe Abercrombie is like, no, because that would ruin it, because like part of what makes it interesting is like, okay, did it really happen that way? And if it didn't, what does that mean? And if it did, what does that mean? And like, if you answer those questions, how did that help? And at the same time, I feel like in A Song of Ice and Fire, he actually does want the lore itself to be interesting, not just the question of, is it true?
Yeah. Speculation is baked into this series, and I think he's considered his world a lot, where a lot of other people don't. And I think what's fun about this series is that the magic in the gods and stuff, we're never going to get an explanation for that. Bloodraven does a glamour in the third book, and he doesn't worship R'hllor, who we see doing the glamours, rattle shirt and man.
I just like that we get him anyway,
right?
When I saw it, I was like, Bloodraven.
Yeah, it's like this mythic character rather than like, how did his powers work and where did that come from? It's like, those aren't the important questions. It's the characters in history. So I think you're right, Alex. I think if we did Robert's Rebellion, it would be like, it's kind of cool. Look, it's a young Robert Baratheon. But like having this other, and Dunk is not really mentioned much, if at all, in the main series, and he's such an important figure of history.
Like certain things I feel like you want there to still be mystery too. Like, I don't need him to explain like the Children of the Forest or the First Man. Like that's what I feel like they're doing very poorly with like Alien prequels. It's like, let's just keep explaining the origins of the aliens. I'm like, you gotta stop.
Except they never like. Okay, that's the one thing that you might. But they didn't even explain the origins. I was like, what the heck?
But that's the thing. It's like, I don't need that, and that's what I hated about part of Mistborn with Secret History. Just that's all I'll say is just like what it does. Like, it's not necessarily a prequel, but like it explains things that I didn't want to be explained, and I was like, but now like your explanation I don't like, and now I dislike it. Like,
it's like whenever someone did a crime and they have a really good explanation and you're like, he did it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there definitely needs to be some kind of mystery to some of it. Like, I don't need everything spelled out.
And that's a talent, right? Picking what's the right mystery. I mean, that's. I mean, also including Bloodraven in the story. That's pretty ballsy. Seeing as the fact that we know he's a 3-eyed crow. How does he get there? I guarantee you, we won't see that. We might see the last step beyond the wall whenever he goes out in North, which is kind of funny because he also mentions that he hates the cold in the North. Yeah. He says, too cold for me. And he's living in a werewolf.
He just becomes a tree.
Yeah, right.
I guess it has to be a situation where like whatever story you're telling in the past is interesting enough to where the fact that your audience is guaranteed to know the end point ahead of time doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because like most of the time that's a problem in a story. If you know the end point before you read it, you're like, oh, that ruins it. But because any prequel, you know the end point already. So that has to not matter in the story that you're telling.
It's Shakespearean in a way too, because this is so bittersweet tragic, knowing that Egg eventually goes mad. And it's kind of like all the renditions of a lot of the Shakespearean plays that we see, like new versions of it, but we know how it ends. It's interesting to see the journey there.
Actually, I was thinking like more, even though they're both history buffs, like honestly, like George R.R. Martin's, the way he's writing A Song of Ice and Fire and the world of Ice and Fire, etc., does feel more like he is a historian of his own world.
Yeah, and I believe it. Yeah.
And where like that's the thing though, like if you if I am watching a new dramatization of the life of Mary Queen of Scots, like obviously I know what happens to Mary Queen of Scots, like spoilers, like she dies. Like that doesn't ruin it, like because like history is a fact, like you already know that about history. Like watching a story about the French Revolution, like about Marie Antoinette, you're like, okay, spoilers, she gets beheaded, but like that's not what's interesting about it. So like I think George approaches it like telling the history of the world, where like just like with our own history, like it doesn't matter that you know the end point. That's not the point.
Yeah,
for sure. Like even if you read or watch like Last Kingdom or Vikings, like they pull from the same stories that exist in history. They're all dead. Like what happens to all these kings and queens that like become main characters.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's not like it doesn't make it not worth watching or reading.
Yeah, we're taking this point about like Shakespeare adaptations that most of the time people know how a Shakespeare play ends because it's so like in the zeitgeist. Like everyone knows how Romeo and Juliet ends. So if you like go to see something that's inspired by Romeo and Juliet or an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, like it doesn't, the point isn't that you don't know how it ends. Like the point is.
Yeah, and
surprise,
Fire and Blood isn't even the beginning of the history of Plantos, as they call it. That's just Westeros.
Yeah,
there's a whole Age of Empires way before in the Doom in Valyria, which we'll never know.
Oh, we're never gonna get that.
Which actually bothers me. Like I just said, I don't want everything explained, but God, what happened in Valyria? I need to know. And why is it just like when you go by, it's just like this mystical place with like smoke still coming off?
Right.
I want to know, George.
It's better that you don't know.
I know you're actually right.
Because certain things like that, like if you go back far enough, things like that, it's like any explanation you get probably is going to disappoint you compared to like what everyone's imagination has been doing about it for 30 years. And so that's kind of where you have to.
And also, what does it mean for the main series, really? I mean, we know that
nothing.
was.
I mean,
exactly.
It's so far behind what happened that it's like, all right, that's cool, but.
Yeah. I really liked what Miss Duncan said here. She said, it's amazing how the information travel and how complete or modified it's delivered. We have Dunk opinions on politics and the realm from the little people. Take, for example, in the second story, when the village lady assumes their visit is a Blackfire war. And I think that's the thing I love most about this is how immersive it is because it's on a smaller scale. The second story is not my favorite. It's actually my least of the favorite of the three.
Same.
But I think it's amazing that we get these petty lord politics. I like the dam that would happen, right? Like that is a real thing that happens. And this is something that a lot of other epic fantasy fails to do for me is connect me to the townsfolk. I didn't actually, you know what series did do this well? Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time did it really well. And
I thought you were going to jokingly say Wheel of Time because Wheel of Time does it too much.
I was gonna say maybe even to a
detriment where it'll go hundreds of pages where I'm like, I don't care about any of these people. Stop it.
That was the one thing that kept me on for Wheel of Time for a few books because I wasn't like loving it, but I did enjoy those pieces and I felt like I knew the different towns and the geographical locations.
Well, I feel like anytime I'm reading an author, and George R.R. Martin is definitely on like the tops of that list, where when they're talking about actual like politics, negotiations, battle tactics, things like that. It feels so grounded and real. Where it's not like, because I feel like so many books, like you can tell the author doesn't know anything about actual, like, just like, boots on the ground types of real things that would affect negotiations. Like, this is what you're fighting about. They'll make it some big thing about, some epic question of like slavery versus not slavery, or like you have this magic artifact and we don't, versus just like literally a dam. Because like that's the kind of shit that makes or breaks like people's survival, and like that's how this works. Or again, like the topography of the land is what affects battle strategy. That like that a real sense of how you use that to your advantage or work around it because it's to your disadvantage, like an actual working knowledge of how that functions.
Yeah. And it's
also it's digestible enough because the books are shorter, so you're not spending like a ton of time on it. But go ahead.
Well, no, I agree. I think this story out of the 3 might be the best thematically, and stuff happens, but I think it's more of what's not said than what is actually said during the story. I really love the exchange whenever Dunk explains why the other knight doesn't name his horse, because if you lose a horse on the battlefield, you have to grieve it. And you grieve less when you don't name your horse. And Egg said, whenever they're training up these farmers that should not be about to fight, and he goes, well, I guess we just shouldn't know their names then. Yeah. And you're like, damn, because that's how the lords treat it.
Yeah. I mean, those farmers are going to die. They're all like ill-equipped.
But at the same time, like, to be a leader is to be able to do the math of millions, that like, because it does. I mean, if you're paralyzed by the life of one man losing that one life, and you can't effectively decide, okay, but we're going to save thousands of lives, even if we lose a couple hundred by doing this. Like, if that's going to stop you from doing that, then you cannot lead.
Yeah. And I think Jon Snow's that in the main series. Like, he sees the cost of being a leader in a lot of ways, but this being over a dam, and really what it comes down to is Eustace and Weber won't talk.
Yeah.
And then Dunk does a trial combat and they talk while he's knocked out and they work it all out. And he's like, well, gee, thanks.
Thanks, Dick.
You could have did this 20 years ago. And makes me wonder if Rowan Weber, who is Tywin's grandmother, which is so weird, it makes me wonder if she knew all along. Like, she wanted what's inch long or inch, the other knight, the one that's almost as tall as Dunk, that Dunk kills. It felt like maybe he had a hand in this, or she wanted him dead, because she obviously lit the field on fire that started the real escalation of combat. And it felt like she kind of had it planned all along. Like, if she was just going to talk to him and then end up marrying him anyways, I feel like she wanted Inch Dude out of the way. And I started wondering, like, did she kill all of her husbands? Because that's the big thing. She's a spider. She killed every husband she's ever had. And in Song of Ice and Fire, we know usually the reputation of someone isn't real, right? Like, it's usually townfolk talking.
Yeah.
Well, then there's always like an inch of truth in a rumor, but like it's usually just an inch.
Yeah. And Inch, I got it. I see what you did
long
there.
inch.
Actually, not what I was doing, but okay.
Yeah, long inch. Thank you, Miss Duncan. So it felt like Weber actually planned this whole thing, and then she ends up becoming a pretty prominent, person, marrying Gerald Lannister down the line. So it's interesting to think about. Did she do it? Did she not? We're not sure. Did all this really start over a dam and some fields on fire? Yes. Did Dunk send all of those farmer soldiers home because he's the man? Like, everyone else is ready to let him die, and he's like, nah, go home. And dude's like, you can't send him home. He's like, shut up.
Dunk is the Captain America of Westeros.
He's awesome. He's so wholesome. I love him. Thanks. Show up. And my first question is, I'm wearing a Game of Thrones onesie. Are you jealous? Because you should be.
I just don't understand how you're not like. Aren't you like sweating wearing?
No, it's cold.
Like, the hood? Okay.
You're on the West Coast.
It's really hot in LA today.
It was like 72 days ago, and today it snowed. So I don't.
My mom told me it was going to rain today, and it has been like blue skies and t-shirt weather all day. I was like, lies.
So here on the East Coast, where our weather can't make up its mind, it was basically summer. And then now the next 2 or 3 days is like lows in the 20s and highs in the mid 40s.
It's insane. I'm going the dorm.
Doesn't make sense.
Mercy also agrees that that Weber needed Inch gone. First thing she asked Sir Dunk, she said, "Are you as strong as you seem, sir?" Like, wanting to know if he thinks he could beat Longinch. So there's something there. There's something about that, and we'll never know. But I did pick up on that this time
Although
around.
I would say like to say that they planned it, I don't think is right because there's so many variables that are beyond your control. But that I mean they're observing advantages and playing sides off each other. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's a difference between like they planned this exactly versus like took advantage of opportunity when it presented itself.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to see like the reasoning behind both sides. But when we see that Eustace lost his son in the Blackfire Rebellion, and this is where we really get to hear about the Blackfire Rebellion and the people on the other side, the people who wanted the Blackfires to win, who thought that they were better, a better choice, and kingly, and he had a flat stomach, and the other guy had a round. I'm like, come on, George, why are you dumping on yourself? So rude.
Get the breastplate stretcher.
But it is interesting to see like that's the political climate, and there's still people under wraps, not so dissimilar to our own Civil War that we had, right? There's still people waiting to remove those overalls.
Are you saying the Confederates are fat?
Yes. It's stupid. But the Blackfires, in this regard, the Blackfires, they're chads. Like they were ripped. So
they're the American Revolution.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
They're Hamilton.
But they lose repeatedly.
Until they win.
Those poor Blackfires. They can't seem to get around. They can't seem to get it done. Also, yeah, Egg, I think it might be in the third story. Miss Duncan Tall says, in this story, we learn about the state of safety of the realm as far as crime, outlaws, raiders, and what people thinks of Bloodraven and his spies. And then we start out the third story with seeing a preacher who had been talking, I think in the second story, maybe, about Bloodraven and how he's, actually the real ruler behind the throne. And then we see his head on a spike. And it's like, ooh, Bloodraven does have spies everywhere, doesn't he? Maybe they're werewolves. Maybe. Possibly, who knows?
So is this feeding into the Bloodraven's like the ultimate bad guy of the series?
Yeah. So I was talking to Liana before you joined earlier, Alex, and I was talking about how Bloodraven is he's essentially Odin. He has one eye, he has these magical powers. He's albino.
Let's calm down.
But he does go along. He is a part of like the mortals that are hanging out in the third story when they're going to this wedding, and he wants to be among like the people, so he glamours himself as Maynard Plum, which I didn't catch in my first read through. I didn't realize that Maynard Plum, who had been there the whole time joking about being a bastard of the king, was Bloodraven, but he was. Which George never outright confirms it, but if you look at the context clues, it's
Pretty
there.
Sneaky.
Yeah, very sneaky. And he makes, it's so weird because we see Bloodraven putting a priest head on a stick. He shows up and saves the day at this tourney, but he's joking about like teats and making crude jokes and joking along with people and drinking.
I feel like it's another thing that lends to the fairy tale folklore-esque vibe of these stories, because like you find, old man godly entity mystical as creature. Like as the guy coming to your door asking for your shelter, but it's secretly some like godly entity. Like that's what you find in like folkloric mythic stories.
Yeah and that's Bloodraven does feel like that. Like he does feel like a myth, almost the only mythical person other than maybe Melisandre. Like she's the only other person I can think of that's like.
Since you brought up Odin, I'm just curious because I thought everyone knew this. Do you know why the days of the week are called Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday?
Thor's Day? Yeah. Someone just told me that.
Day.
I think Erickson told me that.
Wednesday is Odin's Day, Thursday is Thor's Day, and Friday is Freya's Day.
Might have been Philip. Somebody told me that recently, and I was like, holy shit.
Like Loki not get a day?
Yeah, what's up with that? Loki's the coolest.
Some bullshit.
So the third story is my favorite. Which one was your guys' favorite, by the way?
Like the third one.
First one, because it reminded me of A Knight's Tale.
Yeah, that's fair.
Fair.
They're really close because especially with Baelor dying, like that's a pretty monumental moment.
Well, I just feel like the first one the most stood on its own outside of like the universe of these books.
The greater universe, yeah.
Like the first one felt like a contained story that like, okay, like you'd be super confused if you didn't know what a Targaryen was. But like overall, like you can just read that story for itself, and it has enough themes that are self-contained within what has happened in this story and what is paid off in this story that like it's not outside context that makes it interesting.
Yeah. I think Mystery Knight is one of, if not George's best work. There's so much that happens in like 100 and however many pages, maybe it's 200 pages. But like he gets a lot done there. Blood Raven gets put in on the screen. He sneaks in that he's a glamour. Like you can easily miss it. Like
I felt the most confused.
Oh, for sure.
Like, there are a lot of things that I think I'm supposed to be getting, and I'm like,
it's kind of
sure
interesting,
that's interesting.
That you feel like it's his single like greatest work, because people say that about Sanderson, about Emperor Soul being his like best writing.
That's my favorite.
Like everybody praises, Stormlight for what it is, but if you ask somebody like what's their favorite Sanderson, a ton of people say Emperor Soul, and it's like 100 pages.
That's my favorite Sanderson as well. Yeah. I love that book.
But I feel like it's always the most impressive when somebody pulls something off in a short amount of words, because that's a lot harder than pulling something off in a large amount of words.
I think that's why I like Stephen King so much.
That's why I like Neil Gaiman so much.
Yeah, that's another good example. Ocean at the End of the Lane is tremendous.
And just in general, I mean, like Neil Gaiman, I mean, obviously Ocean is great and it's my favorite, or one of my two favorites, but just in general, whenever I'm reading Gaiman, like the amount that he packs into one sentence at any given time, like that he can tell you who somebody is and what they look like and what their vibe is and what their entire worldview is in like one sentence. And you're like, what? How did you just do that? Yeah,
that I think that is the talent of writing and the craft. And some people are really good at leading into something big too. So there's different ways to do it. But I am always most impressed with people who get the most real estate out of their sentences.
Well, and I think that's why it's also like seeing George R.R. Martin in these stories, or I mean, I haven't read Emperor Soul, but presumably with Sanderson in that like then when they're forced to the constraints of, a short story, novella, whatever, that they don't have the luxury and liberty of just like going on and on and on and on. That you have to tell your story and like get in and out.
Did this? It's like, wait, no, stop.
Easy.
It forces you to be cutthroat about exactly what you're keeping in, and then that makes every line gold, because like there's no room for chaff.
Well, and still being able to, a lot of the stuff that we love about the main series, and this is why like there's a lot of people who haven't read this, like that love the main five. They're like, I don't give a shit about Dunk and Egg, and I'm like, you're missing out on some of George's like best work in my opinion, because he still does all the stuff that we love in A Song of Ice and Fire here, and he does it in a different tone.
I think Jimmy's going door to door. Have you heard the good word of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms?
Dunk and Egg. I should.
It's well written. The characters are interesting. Like there's tons of tie-ins and familiarities with the world. It's just a different feel.
It also depends on what people are reading for, because like if people are just like here for the world of Ice and Fire, then then you should read it. But if like you specifically want like expansive battle-filled grimdark stories, that like this really won't deliver that. So like if that's what they're only interested in, then it's like I don't think they're going to like this.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. But if they're in it for the mystery, there's a mystery night. There's a lot of mystery throughout all three stories about who's who. Even when Baelor takes the field, they think it's his son, and it's like, no, it's actually Baelor. It's like, holy shit, like, this is the prince. And then Mystery Night is very well plotted. But on top of that, we get to see George, and this is going to sound like I'm being like tongue in cheek, and I'm not. But you get to see him finish, because these are contained stories. And it turns out his endings are really good. At least I think so. Also, I wanted to mention this for Liene. I'm so sorry to go back to the second story, but Dunk drowns when he's fighting Long Inch. Liene, who brings him back? It's the Ironborn.
Yep.
Because he's the only person that could have brought him back.
Metal.
And I was like, dude, Liene is going to love that, because, and like, including that, right? That's a one-liner. And you're like, the Iron Islands world building paid off in this story. It just, you feel rewarded for paying attention.
I mean, Iron Islands is just the Red Cross doing CPR all over Westeros.
Yeah, that's exactly who they are.
Ironborn without borders, right?
Yes. Oh my god. I really want like a t-shirt of that now.
They're all
it's
about
like
that humanitarian
the same
work.
logo. I want the same logo as Doctors Without Borders, but with Iron Islands. Yes.
Dunk even mentions in the third one, they're talking about, someone's mentioning a Greyjoy rebellion, and he's like, you can't beat them on the land, you got to beat them at sea. And then Dunk's like, I've seen them at sea, you don't want to do that. And in that context, he also fits in that Dunk and Egg had, between the two stories, had went to Dorne and then looped around the old town saw Maester Aemon, where they get the new horse and they name the horse Maester after Maester Aemon, and then Dunk cuts out the hat to fit over the, because Dunk gets a new hat, or I'm sorry, Egg gets a new hat, and he gives his hat to the horse, and he cuts out the ears. It's adorable. It's so funny.
It's something Podrick would do.
Podrick is the new Egg without the royal blood. Well, he's a secret Targaryen, of course, but I've been doing a bad job of keeping up with the chat. I apologize, people. I'm having the best time. Kappa Mike says the third story because snotty Walter Frey shows up and Dunk fights the urge to kill him for his annoying laughter.
Yeah, he saved a lot of people a lot of trouble.
Yes, could have saved us a lot of heartbreak, and he should have thrown him down that well.
Right.
Which reminds me, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What were you gonna say?
It was just a minor detail of like stuff that Egg pays attention to when they're talking about like the crests on shields and like which like family like crest is whose, and they mentioned like the two castles on the river and the bridge. I'm like, yeah, the twins, and he's like trying to explain to Dunk like what these different crests are because he's just like an idiot and doesn't know.
Yeah, he's like,
no,
there's not even a bridge on that one.
Yeah,
Dunk's like, shut up, or I'm gonna clout you in the air.
I don't know if this is gonna make any sense, but Egg reminded me of Spider-Man.
What?
Like his personality and vibe is so
Spider-Man
like,
or Peter Parker?
Well, Peter Parker, I guess.
For Miles Morales.
Which Peter Parker?
Probably Tom Holland. Just because like there's this like earnest sincerity and like go-getter attitude of like, I'm saving people and doing the right thing and like trying to figure stuff out and like intuiting stuff and like picking up stuff as he goes along and applying that as he goes along, not always in the best way. But there's just like sincere, like, I'm your friendly neighborhood prince in disguise, like vibe with him.
I could see that. I mean, Egg has a ton of personality for being so young. And that's one thing George has done very, very well is kid characters, even in the main series. Because I don't like kid characters usually. Stephen King does them very well. Hobb does them well. And George does them really well as well. I said well a lot there.
Tell me you couldn't picture Tom Holland playing Egg.
Shave his head and
Dunk gets mad at him for fighting. He's just like, what? He kept talking shit. He was like, didn't I tell you to like honestly, be quiet and stay out of trouble?
Like the conversation. I mean, Dunk isn't really like Tony Stark at all in vibe, but the vibe of that relationship between Tony Stark and Spider-Man, when like, you know, when he's like
Tony Stark was dumber.
Yeah. But just like, yeah, like if we ignore the personality of Tony Stark, just who he represents to Spider-Man in that dynamic, like I feel like that is Egg.
If we just chop off Tom Holland's legs, shave his head. You got to be dedicated to the role. Cy Kepler says, I think Egg is smarter than Peter. I actually would agree. Egg is pretty damn smart.
Okay, but isn't Peter a prodigy?
Is he though?
Like a science prodigy?
Is Peter a Targaryen?
Yeah. Confirmed. Yes. Oh, man. This is too fun. This is the vibe, though, of Dunk and Egg to me. Like, it's just like joking around of like the silliness of it, while still being impressed by some of the mystery and the plotting of it. One of the really small details of this, and I was watching Alt Shift X's video on the Mystery Night, and he was talking about whenever you see, there's obviously now we know they're Blackfires, but there's lords there that are toasting, and they won't toast to Bloodraven or the king, but they toast over water at the table, at the feast. And it's to signify that they're toasting to the king across the water, which is where the Blackfires are in Essos. And this is actually a thing that happened in Britain back in the day. It was some famous feast. And I think it was the, I'm not going to try to remember. There was a royal family across the sea who they felt were the right family, and they would toast over water to signify it.
Was it the Stuarts?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's it. Look at Leanna over here, Mrs. Historian.
I know nothing about the world of Ice and Fire, but I know the real world.
There you go. But that is like what George pulled from.
Sure it was Lannisters.
Yeah, it was definitely the Lannisters.
Yeah, they were in Scotland, right? The Lannisters, and they were.
That's right. The Jacobites, and the one that Leanna said that I already forgot.
Stuart.
Thank you. But I thought that was a cool little history thing from GRRM. I mean, he obviously really enjoys that, but cool little detail too. And Egg notices and is like, "This is a traitor's. What does he call it? The traitor's
A
tourney.
trader's feast or the trader's tourney. Yeah.
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 Again, Egg is smart as shit.
Or even when he sees the what was it, like a falling meteor or something? What's the shield that he like notices? And he's like, "Oh, you're his son." And then
yeah. Fireball? Is it Fireball's
yeah.
son? It's what's his name? It's Glendon Ball, who says he's the son of Fireball, but you find out his mom was a prostitute. They called her, what was it? It was like Penny something.
Sure,
It was dirty. No, her name is it is Penny something, but it's like really good name for a prostitute. But I can't remember what it is. It's like Penny Patty or something like that. Like you flip her a penny, you get to go, on the ride. But I don't know how to say it. But we find out. I heard Yellow Dick was a #1 customer, but Red Penny Jenny.
That's how he got his name.
Penny Jenny is unconfirmed the mom of Yellow Dick for sure. Leanna just sitting there brooding. Just, why did I agree to this shit?
Grow up, Jimmy.
But he does see that, and Glendon's supposed father, Fireball, which is Quentin Ball, was part of the Blackfire Rebellion, supported the Blackfires, and Glendon ends up fighting Daemon. And he said, "Hey, I would have supported him. I just didn't want to throw the tourney match because I have a lot more honor." But it's funny that the people whose heritage and knighthood is in question, which is Dunk and Glendon, are the two only noble people at this entire thing that's full of the nobles and the knights. And heritage versus choice is like the #1 theme here.
Like when we're talking about, what is the story to tell? What is it? Which pieces should remain a mystery and which pieces should be told, etc., and like what is interesting despite knowing the end. Like Blackfire's Rebellion is like, it's like that's a thing, like from reading the stories. But like honestly, I feel like one of the most interesting things about a rebellion that you already know about is its genesis. Like the first time you begin to foment rebellion against established rule, the first time you have that conversation of, do you think we should overthrow the government? I think it's already a thing. It's been a thing. It's going to be a thing again, like in these stories. And like, that's fine. That's not the project of these books. But like, that's what I think. I don't know what's in Fire and Blood or going to be in Fire and Blood, but like, that's what I would find interesting.
Yeah. And the fact that Daemon, like we see Daemon come up, who is the Piper, right? Or whatever. Fiddler. I'm sorry.
The Fiddler.
Yeah. So he's the Fiddler, but he's actually Daemon the second. And it's, again, his heritage says that I should be a strong leader and I'm going to lead this rebellion and set this right. But his father was able to start a rebellion against the Targaryens, his own family. That's how influential and powerful he was. And Daemon II fails miserably to gather a crowd. So, he thought his heritage meant that he was kind of entitled to this. And it turns out that he was definitely not a better knight than Glendon Ball.
Yeah.
Whose mother was Red Penny Jenny.
I mean, you see that all throughout A Song of Ice and Fire, though. Is that like assumed nobility or assumed respect because of your family name?
Yeah.
Which again is like being a history buff that George R.R. Martin is, like, that's the same with the Jacobite Rebellion. Like the fact that they had a guy that like had a good claim to the throne, but was himself not a great option. So like it didn't. Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to have both. Like you can't just have like the name, and you also can't just be a personality. You have to have the like official title, right? And you also have to be the personality. And if you don't have both, you're gonna fail.
And there was a lot of intolerance towards Daemon because he is a homosexual. I think it's Aelin is the one that attacks Dunk. Is like, "Hey, come here," and then I know where Egg is, and then he like attacks him.
Why is his voice like some alleyway? Like, I got some watches here. You want to buy a Rolex?
Hey, man.
Hey, Dunk, come here.
Sounds like a Joe Pesci cosplay. It just doesn't sound right. How am I funny? Ms. Duncanthal says Bittersteel was a homophobe, and he was. That's why he didn't support Daemon II. At least that was the rumor. And Bittersteel was instrumental in the rebellions. So that was a big blow. Also, Aelin and Dunk get in a fight, and I believe Aelin tries to stab him with a dagger, and Dunk kills him with a rock and throws him down a well. This is actually an exact parallel between Shagwell versus Brienne, but Brienne loses, and she says a dagger always beats a rock. But in Dunk's story, the rock beats the dagger. So it's like rock, paper, scissors, kind of.
I was about to say.
It's really, isn't that? I thought that was a little
dagger,
funny.
stone, parchment?
It has to be. It has to be.
I was just reading some quotes and it made me laugh because we were talking about getting a clout in the air. And Egg is like, or Dunk goes, reading books by candlelight will make you blind. He goes, I need the candlelight to see the words, sir. He goes, do you want a clout in the air? I'll talk back to me.
I think whenever I become a father, I think that is what I will threaten my kids with. I'll never probably do it. I'm saying probably to leave myself some room. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm just going to always threaten for a clout in the air and then never do it like Dunk.
And they'll say, huh?
Yeah, huh? What's a clout?
Mean?
What's an ear by that time?
I mean, a clout chaser. Yeah, you're just trying
Someone mentions the summers have been shorter since the last dragon died and the winters have been longer and crueler because winter is coming.
It's coming.
You get it?
Look at his face.
Foreshadow.
Climate change is a hoax.
Clearly, right? Just because you a Targaryen doesn't mean you are Jaehaerys. I love that. Yeah, Jake, we're reading Fire and Blood. Jake read Fire and Blood this month, and with a couple people, so we'll be catching up to him. But I've been enjoying listening to all of his updates about it. He seems to really enjoy it, so that's pretty cool. Digging the onesie and the Target lights. Let's go. Let's go.
Whatever.
Don't encourage him.
Kev gets it. I'm also drinking the Six Kingdoms whiskey, which is pretty cool.
Six Kingdoms?
Yeah, because it has the three-eyed crow on it. So Blood Raven. So I thought that would be appropriate.
What kind of what actual whiskey is it?
So it's Mortlack, sorry. As you can tell, I've been drinking it. Aged 15 years. So this
you said the best one, right? Was the
Night's Watch.
The Night's Watch.
Yeah, this is probably the third best. I like the Stark one a lot.
That's what I'm nursing.
Yeah, the Stark and the Tully one are really good. The Lannister ones and Targaryen one are harsh. Like they're like.
I think you said the Baratheon one was a really smoky one.
Yeah. Yeah. The Lannister's the most smoky though. The Lannister one's probably the rough. Yeah, that's probably the roughest one, which makes sense because they're pretty brutal. I have read A Night of the Seven Kings just like a year ago. It's a phenomenal book, man. These stories are so good. But seeing that rebellion come to light and them trying to accomplish it, I really enjoyed all of that. Dunk overhearing conversations she shouldn't hear. I'm trying to remember every other aspect of the story because it is definitely the most dense one when it comes
Blood Raven, to answer the question, has 1,000 eyes and one. How do they say it? Something like that?
Yes, and one because he
thousands of eyes and one.
Because he lost his eye during the first Blackfire Rebellion, where he slayed his half brother, who was also a bastard. And that's why people are saying he's pulling the strings behind the curtain, and he's actually a Blackfire, which is so silly because he's the one that ended the Blackfire Rebellion. So in some ways, he's a hero, I guess, depending on what side you're on. But yeah. Blood Raven is Maynard Plum this whole time. And when Dunk sees him, this is right after he kills Aelin. And he tells him, hey, Egg is in the Sept. Whenever he first sees Maynard Plum, he says that for a second, he looked like a man in a cloak with one eye. And he's wearing a big medallion, just like Melisandre's wearing in the main series. And that's the glamour. And as soon as Blood Raven shows up, Maynard Plum never shows up again. It's like perfect timing.
Have you ever seen the two in the same room, Jim?
We have, in fact, not. We have, in fact,
ever since I compared it to the American Revolution, I have been thinking about a Hamilton-style play about the history of Westeros.
They're doing a Broadway play in the coming years, and it will be the Tourney of Harrenhal, where we'll find out what happened.
But will it be raps written by Lin-Manuel Miranda?
It is not.
Probably.
George is actually writing it, which is kind of crazy.
Of course he is.
Anything to not
write. Is he
writing?
Is it going to be like a play or like a musical? Or
I believe it's just a straight up play.
Nice.
Which is honestly, the Tourney of Harrenhal is the catalyst for A Song of Ice and Fire. So
honestly, the thing about that I find the most like enticing and interesting is just like the stagecraft of how they're going to bring to life that kind of thing on on a stage, because like you can't do the kind of things you do in film and
and it's a tourney, right? Like you're gonna have to have the
This is gonna be like Warhorse. Like are they gonna use like a puppet?
Oh, that would be kind of neat, wouldn't it?
This is like honest. Okay, so this is
really
not what we're
oversized puppets.
I was
Right?
like, this is like not what we're talking about at all. But like when I first heard that they were making a movie of Warhorse, I was like, why the fuck are they making a movie of Warhorse? Because the thing that's impressive about the play Warhorse is that they have this cool puppet that really looks like a horse. And you're like, wow. But when you do a movie, it's like a real fucking horse. So you're like, great. It's a horse. What's special about that?
could you imagine oversized puppets though? Like that could be really cool. And then
or like the Lion King musical where the whole thing is just like puppets and shit.
And we get to see prime Barristan Selmy. Wow, let's go. I'm in. Barristan, the fucking bold.
Young and strapping.
Get Zac Efron to play him.
And this whole thing just went.
And Henry Cavill can play every other character. Yeah, so how about whenever Glenn Ball comes out before he fights Daemon and he's been tortured and burned. And that's when I was like, oh, maybe this isn't a kid's story. Like maybe I shouldn't read this to an 8-year-old because that's pretty brutal. It's pretty rough.
That's the only thing that made you think you shouldn't read it to an 8-year-old?
Yeah, well, you know. Yeah, you're right. Oh, also, how about Dunk losing in the first round of the joust? And getting,
I didn't expect that. He got his ass kicked.
He got his ass whooped. And it's like George doing those subtly real things. Because like we kind of talked earlier about like having to suspend your belief that Maegor would send egg. But these are the pieces that feel real. And like, you know, you would lose some. And Dunk
the whole time he's just like, I'm going to win. He's like, I'll get my money back. It's fine. And he just gets knocked on his ass.
Peak knocks him down. And then Peak, we find out the Peak, who's a, you know, famous tourney knight, is rigging this. He's grifting. He has a grift where he bets against himself, and you know, and he never wins the tournaments and all this stuff.
Sandbagging son of a bitch.
He is. He's a sandbagger. That's exactly what he is. And then we see later that Dunk is much better at hand-to-hand combat than he is at jousting. I think he cuts off his arm, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, he mentions that the egg too, because he's like, I have to do like win it back in the swords or whatever. He's just like, this is just a joust, bro. Like, there's no swords.
And he said, you know, is there a fight? And he's like, you don't fight at a wedding. Little did we know a whole rebellion was being planned at a wedding.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
that's called dramatic irony.
You know, Egg is smart until he's not, I guess, right?
I have to say though, like I am still grateful for A Knight's Tale for like I have my entire working knowledge of what like jousting is like is from A Knight's Tale. Like whenever I read it in like fantasy books or history books, I'm like, I only know any of what you're talking about because of A Knight's Tale.
Yeah. I told you I was better with the sword. Yeah, what a good line.
Yep.
He was supposed to die
even during that fight though, like he's getting his ass kicked there too for a while.
Yeah, he is.
Then he powers up.
Yeah, he does.
I'm gonna quit playing around.
It's fun to see that like Dunk's actual being tall and thick actually matters, because Kappa Mike says he was supposed to die. Like he was supposed to die that entire time. But his anatomy that has been described over and over again actually mattered. You know, like that's like a little thing, but it goes a long way.
What's up?
What's up? It's never too late to talk about some Dunk and Egg. But that fight scene between him and it's Peak, I think, right? Yeah, I thought that fight scene was the best one out of all of them, and I really like the one from the second. Actually, I like all the fights; they're pretty damn good. George writes good combat.
He does.
And Lloyd was excellent at narrating it too. But yeah, so we see Bloodraven come in, which now we know he's been joking around and stuff. Like I said, it's kind of funny to see him chumming around, and he comes in and starts serving out sentences. And we find out that the Frey in the story had already turned sides, and he had sold out the rebellion. So Freys were still
classic Freys.
Fucking Freys did. They
Frey's got a Frey.
I swear to God.
They're still the worst 100 years ago.
Yeah, and then Walter just running around. That's probably the best.
I don't think George is interested in like complicating the genetic legacy of the Freys.
No.
You're a Frey, you're a piece of shit.
There's a lot of nuance. Not with the Freys though. They're all just
some bloodlines are too strong.
Yeah, Glendon Ball coming out and beating Daemon is definitely one of the one of the coolest moments. And this is the story where I started saying, okay, like this story is really all just about heritage and what does it mean? Why does it even matter who your parents are? But I do think that there's a counter argument in the story because Dany is likely to go mad, in my opinion, because of her heritage. And Egg,
you hate women, Jimmy.
Oh, Jesus.
She just needs to shave her head, and then she won't be
Clearly.
crazy.
Yeah.
But we do see Egg also go crazy with dreams. So here's the question: is it in their
grows
blood?
His hair out. I'm telling you.
Once he has the hair past the ears,
It's
it's
in
a
the
wrap.
hair. Yes.
So here's my question: is it because of their heritage, or is it because of the prophecies?
Is it because of their heritage?
Oh no! Oh no! We see a lot of prophecies here, though. Darian the drunk.
This story does get a little hairy.
It does.
All right, I'm done.
God damn. Darian sees Dunk in white, right? Meaning in the Kingsguard, which we know he does achieve. We see a dragon being born at this wedding, and we think it's going to be a real dragon from the dragon eggs, but it's actually Egg being announced and being, and now everyone knows proper who he is. So I think prophecy and the expectation that comes with that is obviously a really big thing. We talked about in the Dance with Dragons about the big giant going through Winterfell and crashing the walls, and it ends up actually just being Sansa getting her castle knocked down in the snow. But we've also seen other big prophecies come to fruition, like Dany's prophecies in the House of the Undying, which are really magical. So is it the heritage? Is it the blood of the Targaryens? Is it the inbred blood of the Targaryens that are causing these things to happen? Or is it the prophecies that they surround themselves with that they keep passing on?
What Mercy Water said, mad is such a lazy label. Surely we're meant to question that because
Yes. I guess it's me for what I'm wondering is what is the catalyst? I don't think George is saying because they're Targaryens, they've went mad. I actually think it's a lot more about what's passed down generation to generation. It's the same thing that plagues our real world. People who are stuck in family traditions that are backwards. And
there's the age-old absolute power corrupts absolutely kind of thing.
Well, that's true too. Yeah. The prophecy.
And we've seen, Targaryens had absolute power. They went crazy. The Lannisters temporarily have absolute power. Crazy.
Yeah.
If Dany acquires absolute power, crazy.
Yeah. And I think Sai has it really well here. The prophecies reflect the heritage. So they try to make sense of genetics. Huh. Egg isn't born of incest. He's actually 2 generations from incest. And actually, Egg is, and so is Darian. And Darian's actually a slight clue that Jon Snow's parents are at least half Targaryen, because you see that even though the seed is strong with the Targaryens, that they can have dark hair, which Darian has. That's why he didn't have to shave his head. And it's actually a little bit of a clue that Jon Snow can be dark-haired Targaryen, which is really cool, actually. Eggy is a Dane. Yeah. What's his mom's name? Like Margiel or something? It's a weird name. Or maybe it's just the incest.
Damn it.
Stuff to do with literal dragon blood. Well, also, if we could take it back to story 1, Aerion goes completely insane. He ends up coming back over.
The joust. Yeah.
Yeah, and then later down the road, he is the one who drank dragon fire, or what I'm forgetting what it's called. I'm sorry. I'm a little tipsy. Wildfire. He drinks it because he thinks it's going to turn him into a dragon, and he dies, which is actually one of the reasons why Egg gets on the throne, which is kind of funny. But remember, we actually hear that from Tyrion back.
I was going to say we've heard that before.
He's that Targaryen, and we see how insane he is. He goes after Tanzil for showing a dragon even dying because he really believes he's a dragon.
Yeah,
but Derry's comment about literal dragon blood, I never thought about. So we keep talking about Hobb and Martin and how like warging and the wit is similar. But I never really thought about, and so I'll be vague, so no spoilers, but like this part of it being similar to Hobb, like I never thought of that.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Could be.
Yeah, and each case is different because Ms. Duncan's actually right, because Egg, and we can talk about, we read like the World of Ice and Fire, but you hear that a lot of his policies are actually for the people because of obviously his time with Dunk, right? So he makes a lot of really good decisions, but there's a ton of rebellion during his phase. His kids mess everything up. It's actually not Egg's fault. And Egg thought the only way to save the kingdom was to birth the dragons. Like he thought that was, he's having dreams and all this stuff. So like, it's not like Egg wanted to burn down Summerhall and kill everyone. Like that wasn't the intention. It's actually really goddamn sad. Little egg, dude, in a straw hat.
Mm-hmm.
My boy.
That is an adorable picture of him.
It is. And also how I don't know about you guys, but like I love Jenny of Oldstones. That song is tremendous from the show. If you
Well, you mean the one that Pod sings? You know, the new egg.
Oh my god.
It's all coming together.
Oh my god. Because it's about Summerhall, right? Because Rhaegar would go back to Summerhall where he was born out of tragedy. This all makes this song like have so much more layers. And I also think it's just like a really amazing song. But if you say one thing about season 8, say the soundtrack was ridiculous.
The soundtrack's always been great because my
So
favorite
good.
screen composer composed the soundtrack.
That was the best episode of that season. That just ominous tone right before
one of the best episodes.
Long night.
I have to say, like, honestly, like, you can trick me into thinking anything is good if you have like a single solitary a cappella voice singing an ominous song in your movie or show. I'm like, this is great.
I'll make sure to include that in my next works.
I mean, the dwarves and the Hobbit singing. There's a part where like there's I don't even know who it's supposed to be, but there's somebody singing in Snow White and the Huntsman. It's like this like a cappella melancholy song, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, but that movie also has Kristen Stewart, so.
But it has Chris Hemsworth also.
It's
a little bit of balance. I don't know who outweighs it there. Derry said, "Did any of the targets who bonded to dragons go batty? Or is it just the ones without dragons?" I don't know, but we should keep an eye out for that when we read Fire and Blood. Probably a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. People are also very excited about your dog, Alex. Your dire wolf. Sorry.
Cora.
Aw. She like
what do you want?
To think Barristan and Aemon are the last people to know Dunk. Yeah. That shows you how much Barristan knows. It's crazy. Crazy that is the cause.
Yeah.
Only Barristan left. Jenny of Oldstones, the love of the Prince of Dragonflies, Duncan the Small. What will be Dunk Dragon or Dragonflies? Goddamn. The same composer is one of the showrunners for House of the Dragon, right? Yeah, the composer is back for House of the Dragon. Everyone's back but D&D, which means that this show is gonna slap. This show is gonna slap. Listen, guys.
Well, to their credit. Well, I guess Fire and Blood Part 2 is not out, but if it's mostly just Fire and Blood, they could do a good job adapting that.
I think it's
don't let them. Don't tell them to write. Don't tell anybody to write George R.R. Martin's works other than him, because it doesn't work out.
Well, apparently he was really heavy-handed in House of the Dragon, so I think it could be really good.
It might be because he saw what happened with season 7 and 8 and was like, "That's never happening to a work of mine again."
Supposedly he took multiple flights to New York to try to convince them that they were going astray, and they were like, "How about you don't direct an episode every season?" So I don't know what happened there. I do know that House of the Dragon has a lot of promise, I think. Also, it's supposedly rumored to come out in August, which would put it near the Tolkien show. So if the Tolkien show is a disaster, that's good for House of the Dragon.
Wasn't it supposed to come out in spring?
It was, but I think they ended up pushing it back. I don't know why. I think it has that. Strangely enough, I think it has to do something with the stock market, because Warner is acquiring Discovery, and they want to like release their shows after the merger or something like this. It's very strange. But HBO is making some. Well, not HBO, but their parent company, Warner, is making big moves. So, they basically shifted.
Monopoly.
Yeah. Hey, at least
need a Blackfire rebellion against the monopolies
God,
of the media conglomerates.
Netflix tried, and then they.
I was thinking about that earlier about Disney, just because we watch Disney movies all the time with our kids, and then I was just like, I can't think of like an animated musical that I am familiar with that's not a Disney product.
Anastasia.
But it's on Disney Plus, isn't it?
But it's made by Fox.
Maybe not. Maybe that's like the only one I could think of. But
got one.
But I was just sitting there, I was just like, I'm pretty sure they just like monopolized the cartoon musical and no one else makes them.
Well, I mean, there's the DreamWorks. I mean, like Shrek and.
But those aren't musicals though. There's just music playing in those movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, without derailing into Disney.
That's all good. I mean, we will be doing Fire and Blood next, and I think it's going to be really exciting because we're going to know exactly what to expect.
Is Jimmy excited about reading a
I
Song
don't
of Ice
think
and
he
Fire
is.
related
Who,
book?
me? Never.
Have you read it before, sir?
I've never read it cover to cover. How about that? Yeah, I've never read it cover
You're a
to cover.
fake fan. I knew it.
Fake fan.
What a dork.
So you've read Night 7 times, but never completely read Fire and Blood.
I've always kind of saved
Explain.
it because I didn't want it to be over. But I've read portions of it, but I've never sat down and did beginning to end, which I'm going to do. I've read The Conquest like 3 times because I love it. I think Aegon is a fascinating character, even more so his sisters that he's married to. Which, by the way, well, we'll get into it next.
Rhaenys and what was the other one?
Rhaenys and Chat.
It was Rhaenys. Rhaenys was the badass that like flew up to Dorne, right?
Yes, and they never found her body, and she had a crown, and I think it's going to show up again, possibly. I think that there's a good chance Doran is going to crown young Griff with it, which it would be the most ridiculous tie-in. It would be so sick, dude. Oh, all right.
That didn't happen in the show, so I don't think that.
Fuck the show. The show's still really good, by the way. Like my wife's watching it, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is better than everything.
Go back and watch
the first few seasons. Yes,
watch 100%. The first 4.5 seasons of that show. It is just like peak television,
dude.
There's a reason it became a phenomenon. Like the people like to pretend like that we were just like dumb in the beginning. Like no, it was good.
Every one of us tuned in every Sunday night for that shit.
Season 6 ending is ridiculously good. Like,
they're crossing the sea.
It's that's whenever the set blows up. And listen, I think season 5 and 6 have problems, but you can't tell me that the end of season 6 isn't just some of the
season 6 also ends with Dany coming over, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You see
all the ships
shot and they're
the dragons
fight.
like,
it's happening. It's so sick, dude. And even season 8, for everything that everyone talks about it, like A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is one of the best episodes. It's absolutely one of the best episodes. And it calls into what we just read, which is so cool. I think the Brienne and Dunk ancestry there is one of the coolest things. Oh, wait, it's not ancestry. Or I'm sorry, Dunk is the ancestor. Or I got it messed up on one of the streams and someone called me about it, but they're related. How about that? I'm a little tipsy, just slightly.
Brienne is Dunk's father.
Confirmed.
Jimmy is just high on A Song of Ice and Fire. I love all the time.
Varys the teleporter. Yeah.
Cannot confirm.
There's an awful lot of teleporting.
Honestly, the teleporting is not nearly as egregious as like smart characters suddenly being dumb so that plot can
or like
happen.
The Golden Company just being useless.
But like Tyrion becoming an absolute nincompoop, like it's unforgivable.
I think that Dunk and Egg is a perfect thing to adapt.
Because of how like scoped it is.
Once again, like I have no idea what Fire and Blood is like, so I can't say they should have done this instead or whatever. But like having read this feels like a TV show.
Yes, and George does write episodic. Like that is how he writes his chapters, even the longer ones.
It would be a great miniseries, even. Like you don't even have to do like a 6-season thing. Like it could be like a 12 episode, like and done.
Yeah, if you
it could be 6 episodes where like each of these stories is 2 episodes.
I agree
for this one, but I mean, like if he's planning on doing like up to Aegon the Conqueror and like that, then yeah.
As someone said, finding out Jimmy wrestled is greater than finding out Brienne's liver.
It is true.
I did wrestle. Yes, I used to be cool. Not so much anymore. Now I
little
wear
known fact: he wrestled in a onesie.
I did not.
So
I wore.
This is a little
Speedo.
callback to that.
I had wonderful legs.
Was it in A Song of Ice and Fire Speedo?
No, but let me tell you. All right, this is kind of a side tangent. The biggest regret I have in my wrestling career. I mean, I have a lot, but my biggest regret is not reading more when I was a wrestler because I was playing a character and telling stories. And there's so many times where I read this stuff and I'm like, I could have made this work. Like, obviously it's not going to be a 1-for-1, but there's so much about character building and storytelling that I know now that I wish I would have known back then, and it would have helped me stand out. And I regret it so much. That's a random tangent. Sorry. That's a chatting with nuts tangent. People are like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Do we think they should include the gaps during Old Town Trip like in these books? I mean,
well, apparently he might still Yeah, he might still write the Dorne story because he said
be
they didn't have.
interesting.
Yeah, I'd be interested because
They're
I wanted
short
to.
enough that like I don't think it would be a bad thing. It just I guess it depends on if he actually outlines this. Like, how many of these do you want to do before you get to
Yeah.
Aegon the Conqueror?
Let me look this up because he actually has the titles that he has planned for Dunk and Egg. He said they could change.
So does he actually know, at least as of right now, how many he's planning on writing?
He said it could be anywhere between, like you said, 6 to 12, but he said I'll
Okay.
write as many as it takes to get to where I want to go. Like he knows the ending, which is Summerhall.
Well, yeah,
So
but it's GRRM, so
it'll grow.
it could end up being 70 of them.
It'll probably spin off. So you have the Mystery Knight, which is last, and then he said the Southern Sword, which Dunk meets old Nan, which would be young Nan in this story, which is hilarious. The Village Hero, which people think will be the Bracken Blackwood feud, and Egg meets Betha Blackwood, the story of the village becoming a royal fief as Hoster Blackwood in Dance. I don't know what that means. Number 6, the Prince's Shield. Number 7, the Sellsword. Number 8, the Last Suitor. Number 9, the Raven's Escort. 10, the White Knight. 11, the King's Champion. Number 12, the Lord Commander. And number 13 would be the True Knight, Summerhall. So the King's Champion and Lord Commander would be him, obviously, in the King's Guard when Egg becomes king, which would be, honestly, I will inject a Kingsguard short story into my veins.
He's just standing around the whole time, like next to the Iron Throne, just
tasting food for him. Yeah.
Are we gonna do anything today?
I mean, I love like for instance, Janis Slint. You know, we hate him so much.
Piece of shit.
But could you imagine like seeing like a Kingsguard drama? You know, it's like a cop drama almost. Like they're cops in King's Landing.
Well, would Barristan be in the Kingsguard at the same time?
Yes.
Well, they had that very well-reviewed miniseries called The Bodyguard. So just medieval version.
I'm in. I'm absolutely in.
See why Aemon refuses the throne and takes the black.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why it's Aegon the Unlikely. You know, someone actually corrected me. I said 7. I guess it was 8 people after they leave the first story. There were still 8 people in front of Egg that had to die before he could be.
Well, we know what happens, and it doesn't take that long.
You know, Leanna brought this up earlier, and we kind of talked about what makes it work, but it is impressive to know where this ends. Like, we kind of know where this ends, and I still want to know everything in between so bad.
Yeah.
Because George,
but it's also like, again, as the author, like knowing that balance of like answering some questions, but leaving some unanswered forever, because like it is better to not answer it, like knowing which is the time to answer and which is not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, but for instance, like when we go to Winterfell, and we see the She-Wolves and the Stark Secession, which is really cool. I think that'd be fun to see. We won't see Dunk like knock boots with old Nan.
Why not?
It'll be hinted at, I think.
It's HBO.
It'll be a graphic.
I hope it's
scene. It'll be 15 pages long.
Full frontal.
Pink mast.
I don't know. It's gonna be a big mast.
Gold cloaks are cops. White cloaks are special ops. Yeah. It would be so fun. 18th in line. 18th. I'm sorry. Thank you, Derry.
Do you know anything about anything?
Not really. Fake fan. Well, I think we covered all of them. I know we could go into more detail and stuff, but I kind of wanted to keep this light. Everyone's favorite. So Leanna's was the first. Alex is the third. Mine's also the third. But
everyone hates the second one. The second one should be cut. It's bullshit.
I will say the second one was a lot better on this time because thinking about Weber in a different context kind of helped me out. And I do like the fact that it was about a dam. Erickson's latest Malazan novel is all about a flood, which I think is fascinating. Like the fact that a flood can cause a lot of turmoil. Like we're talking about not a temporary, but like a changing of the landscape.
I mean, look at how a flood is
like
handled now. Like imagine how a flood was handled 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, and I got news for you, folks. That's going to happen in Miami. Give it 50 years, 100 years, and it's going to be really weird. And a lot of at-risk population across the sea or across the ocean, rather, you know, they're not going to have homes. Millions of people displaced. So this is something that is still relevant to today. And whenever authors like tap into like little things like that,
Well, I mean, like how much of Middle
Really
Ages
cool.
history is also to do with like climate change, the opposite direction, because it was like a micro ice age. Like that
yeah,
is not a factor in exactly how Middle Ages history went down. So like
Even
the
just like
fact that like
normal ass
authors,
weather just like completely fucks everything up.
yeah.
Like I forget which season it was in The Last Kingdom because I haven't gotten to the book yet, but like bad weather's coming. Like it's just gonna get cold and rainy, and they're like, "Shit, do we attack now or do we wait the winter?" Like, because if we don't take this kingdom now, like we're kind of
I mean, like
screwed.
when you look at like Napoleon's invasion of Russia, like the reason he failed was because of Russian winter.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And Hitler going into Russia.
Yeah.
He was not ready. He wasn't ready. A lot of times the earth, it's not really the earth, right? But like weather does push people into conflict. I really love that about Erickson's last book. And I love the damn plot in book 2 more because I think it's just because I'm a little more knowledgeable about things that have happened in the past. And like those really are catalysts for things. So I love book or story 2. I don't know, book 2, whatever. A lot, but the
It's just
third
not as
one,
good as the other two.
yeah, the third one really has some epic moments, and seeing Bloodraven on the page is like haunting. Miss Dog on the Call asks if we're going to split the Fire and Blood stream. Do you guys want to do that? It's a
Split
big
into
book.
what?
Maybe split in half.
At first, I thought she said, "Are you gonna spit fire and blood?" And I was like, "What the
Well, you
hell?"
know it.
I mean, it's not longer than Dance's Dragons.
Yeah, but there's a lot more stories.
I mean, you're the expert, Jimmy. I haven't read it, so
Well,
I mean, shit.
I don't know
Well,
why
it
we
could
would need
either-
to.
I mean, we talked about each main series book for like 3 hours.
We could get through it. We could probably. Get
Why
through
is
it
my
there.
book ripped? First of all,
Rip? Oh, that's
Because
terrible.
your children probably threw it on the
That's
ground.
probably
God, it's it.
it has been thrown a couple of times by my asshole son.
Your children are like, I threw it on the ground.
He
Y'all hate the
literally
story
does
of
it.
Sir Bennis and Ginger Widow. Come on, listen to the graphic read by Valkyris on YouTube. Uses Damon's speech chills. Oh no, I don't know. We don't hate the second story. We're just joking around.
Yeah, so I mean, Fire and Blood is pretty long. But
it is very
where are
long.
the natural splits?
So it's actually separated into like periods of history, and I think there is one towards the middle. But it just depends. I don't know. It just depends.
I mean, if we leave this up to Jimmy, he's gonna have like however many chapters are. That's how many live shows we have, and we have one for each chapter.
I mean, you could do that.
That's a lot. Where is the? I don't see like an obvious one in the table of contents though.
Yeah, little factors changing big events.
Unless it's after Heirs of the Dragon, because then there's like 6 chapters that say the dying of the dragons, and then there's the aftermath.
It's a history book. Yeah.
Someone in chat that's read Fire and Blood, please tell me where there's a natural split.
So, and this is, I think this is probably why, because so like the Dance of Dragons is a large section of the book, but there's like a ton of other stuff, but we could easily talk probably an hour on the dance, like easily, because that's what Fire and Blood will be about.
Since we're averaging 3 to 4 hours per stream, though, I feel like
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I mean, to be
2
fair,
hours of dance and still have 2 hours left for everything else.
I mean, the Night of the Seven Kingdoms was pretty short, and yeah, granted, we talked about not just the book, but it's been almost 2 hours, and because we have problems.
Well, and also let's be honest. Like we're never going to cover every detail in that.
As
book.
much as we admire brevity, we do not. Let's do as we say, not as we do.
Sai was saying maybe before the dance. I would say we're going to play it by ear, folks. I don't know if we'll split them. I would say go into the intention of not splitting it, but maybe we'll send each other a message like halfway through, like what we're thinking.
Let's plan on not
like,
splitting it, and then as we're reading it, be like, okay, this is going to be way too much to cover.
Yeah. And
well,
let's be
if we
honest.
did split it, would we want to do like 2 nights back to back or like
double header?
I was just thinking about getting off easy on having to read 400 pages of it this month and then reading 400 pages in the next.
We'll actually just start at noon Eastern and just stream for like 10 straight hours.
I'm
just
down
talking about it.
I mean, we can talk.
We'll just have an intermission after 4 hours to go pee, and then
have some nice music going.
We can eat and describe our food like GRRM always does. It'll be great. We can toast over water for the king across the pond.
That was another thing that he did do, and not to the same extent, but he did describe some food in these short stories. He did make sure you knew what everybody was eating at the fancy table and all the salt beef that everyone had to soak in beer.
But the little detail of the toast over the water mattered, right? So like that's kind of cool. But GRRM loves talking about his salted beef. He loves salted beef. Kappa Mike says, not sure if there is a natural split in half, but I would say the dance and the conquest, maybe up to Magor's reign, are two big parts. I personally love Jaehaerys' reign too, but it's all peaceful. Yeah, I've actually heard the peaceful reign is the most interesting part of the book, because I think that's when a lot of the social things get passed. Jaehaerys for one and all else the other. To look in the detail of the sea snake in his dad.
We'll figure it out. I mean, it is the last one that we're doing officially, because I don't know if we'll do World of Ice and Fire, because that's definitely one that would be kind of. It's not a book. It's like
legit a coffee table book. Yeah.
It's not a story.
I think
yes.
It honestly, I think we should dedicate a large amount.
It is in fact a book. That was
published. It was published. I think we should go into it with the intent, and people just to know, we are going to be talking about the dance a lot, because that is what House of the Dragon is based on.
Or I mean, like, we could just start earlier than we have tended to. Like, not noon, but, like, we've tended to start 6 my time, 9 p.m. your time. So if we started, like 4 or 5 my time and like 6 or 7 your time or whatever it works out to.
That?
Kev's talking about it. After Fire and Blood, let's run it back, starting with the Game of Thrones. I'm down.
No,
I told these two before. I said
we have already agreed to the horrendous thing that we are reading next.
Oh, Empire of the Edgelord, hell yeah!
Empire of the Edgelord on Alex's channel, because it's Alex's fault this is happening.
That's a big book.
Big book.
So now Ms. Duncan says we should split into 3 parts,
and then we're doing.
I think
after, are we going to go straight from A Song of Ice and Fire to fucking J. Kristoff?
We have to take a break. We have to take a 1 month break.
We got what buddy reads?
Well, we can buddy read something.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Empire of the Vampire.
I just realized Leanna tried to sign me up for another read along with Red Country, but she's already trying to get me to read the Wolf, the Spider, and then the other thing.
The Cuckoo. Yeah, I know.
Leanna is slowly taking over my TBR.
We are doing that. Ridiculous. We already agreed to it. It's happening.
This is ridiculous.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't say you should reread all of First Law, just specifically Red Country. And it's a reread, so you could just like casually do a pacey audio while you're cooking.
Dude,
read along for not a blog.
It's just a bunch of Jets football updates. He literally has written more words about the Jets and the Giants than he has wins a winner. It hurts.
Fucking not a blog.
The worst. Oh man,
we can all get pissed off because he's still not giving us wins.
I think it's a good idea to go into Fireblood thinking it'll be an overview, kind of like what we did here. And then if we want to do more, like we can just do streams, right? Like, it's not a big deal.
Here you go. Here's how George opens up. Too much to do. Too much to do. No shit, bro.
Dude, some people get like, I know some really amazing content creators that have made their like living off of A Song of Ice and Fire, like big
oh my
YouTubers.
God, yeah.
And they are some of them are on hiatus because they said
they can't do it anymore because they've been covering it 365 for like 15 straight years, and they're just like, literally, we have nothing left to talk about.
They feel like for the first time that, because they've been very optimistic, they're saying that they feel like it's the first time that they're just having to accept that George isn't interested in finishing the series, which is interesting.
The Dragon comes out, and then it all starts again.
For me personally, I read that post and I didn't read the internet reaction. I thought it was a positive post. He was just saying, hey, I'm working on a bunch of stuff. I'm still working on the Winds of Winter. I know that that's the only thing anybody cares about, but I like these other things too. And I just took it as like him saying, like, I'm still working on it. And for me, like, I'm not convinced he's going to finish the whole series, but I was just like,
the thing is, like, he's always working on it. He's just also doing 150 other projects. So it's like his level of working on it is not Brandon Sanderson being like, surprise, I wrote 5 novels.
But also, like, the thing is, like, to be working on something like that doesn't necessarily always mean word count.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's, thinking through where you want something to go, planning out some arcs, like thinking through some twists, researching things. Like, there's other things that go into working on it. So, like, just because you don't have pages to show for it doesn't mean that you haven't been, like, working on it.
Yeah.
So I mean, already though, based on this one, so we have the Rise of the Dragon coming, an illustrated history of the Targaryen dynasty from Aegon the Conqueror to the regency of the boy king Aegon the Third. So there you go, more Targaryen content.
Which, I mean, I'm down for.
I'm sure we're all gonna buy it.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to. The only problem I have is George telling us we should care more about the other stuff. He's working on what he really wants. See, but I don't think he even really said that, Kev. Like, I think he's just saying that, like, hey, there's other stuff. Like, if you're a fan of my work, like, I don't think he ever like implicitly said like you need to care about these things.
Yeah.
He was just saying he cares about them, and I believe that because his passion's always been writing television, so it makes sense. And
so
also,
go ahead.
When you make $150 million, it's really hard to do things.
Well, I think
No
as
one's
I
gonna
mean,
convince
it's a
you to do
double-edged
shit.
sword when you have a really popular series, which like is an enviable position to be in for a lot of authors. You're like, oh, like to have the series that people are obsessed with, like that's the dream. But also, it's like it's shackling, and like to be like someone like Neil Gaiman or Stephen King, who is just like, I can just write whatever I feel like writing. Like I'm not shackled to any series that people are married to that want to see the end of it. Like I don't do sequels, I don't do series, so I could just like write whatever, and people are happy to see it. Versus like being shackled to a series.
Dude, Rise of the Dragon is gonna include 180 brand new illustrations.
Oh, I'm buying it. Like people are mad about it. And I'm like, I'm buying it. Like,
I mean, of course we are.
Yeah, why wouldn't I?
A condensed Fire and Blood art book.
It sounds phenomenal. Kappa says, at this point, a part of me wishes George would focus on the stuff he can actually finish. Would be a shame if we never got the rest of Dunk and Egg. Yeah, and that's kind of what I said at the beginning of the stream. Like, I would be happy if he finished Dunk and Egg. Like, I would be equally happy as the main series being finished. And I know a lot of people don't feel that way, but I do. I love these stories. They're great.
Yeah.
They actually are worth rereading. And how many long series have I read that were not worth rereading that I'll never reread again? You know, even his short stories, I think, have a lot of
I feel like
value.
the idea of like planning what you're going to work on based on what you can finish is just like just that's not how creativity and art works. And like I'm just like I always use food comparisons and metaphors, but if you have like a bunch of food left over in your plate and like a bunch of different parts of your meal left over in your plate, and you have the least left of like one part of it, but the thing you want to eat is more of is the thing you couldn't possibly finish, but like you want to be nibbling that. Like it's not like you're like, well, but I can finish the green beans and I can't finish the potatoes, so even though I want the potatoes, I will. Like that's not how you eat. You just keep eating the potatoes because that's what you feel like eating. So like that's how creativity works. Like you're like, well, I can finish this, so I will like suddenly find creative inspiration to work on it because that's the thing I can finish. Like that's just like not how it works.
Yeah. Karen says, no, I don't want any more Targ content. Isn't that the new Targ book just in his name anyway? Yeah, so he had very little to do with it. It's Ilio and Linda, which I'm not I'm not a
it's literally it says right here, if you read the blog post, it's a they say that think of Rise of the Dragon as a deluxe reference book.
Yeah.
So it's gonna just be mostly illustrations with like
it feels a lot like all the Star Wars extended universe. Like here's a book entirely about how the aircraft work.
Yeah, so many people said, "Oh, but he's been working on this, but not wins." It's like it's Ilio and Linda. Like it's not even really him, and
his name's attached to all sorts of shit. But like he's probably directly involved in so much that whatever he does with wins just takes forever, and he's probably so far beyond like wanting to sit down for years at a time and just think through how to fuck to piece it all together.
Yeah, he's got a lot to resolve, but I would be really happy to see the She-Wolves of Winterfell.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty sweet. I'd be excited about that, and whatever he puts out, I'll check it out. He's my favorite. So I'm so excited that you guys read.
I just feel like you in a onesie with the hoodie on, being like, anytime he releases something with like your like direwolf teddy bear, like I'm there, George, on opening night.
Listen, this is the only thing in my life I fanboy for. And I spent a lot of time in wrestling not fanboying for anything that I love because we weren't supposed to as wrestlers. It's a big, long, convoluted thing I'm not going to explain. But it's fun to be a fan. I know a lot of people are miserable, but for me, I'm good. I'm good. And I'm super excited you guys read that for the first time. That's really awesome.
Yeah. I do kind of feel bad that I don't know if he's always had comments disabled, but comments being disabled on his blog posts, because every single one of them is just going to be the worst comment on the internet.
Yeah, like whenever he's like, my friend died today, and people are like, wins.
Give me wins.
This is like, I don't even like when people say that like George R.R. Martin or Patrick Rothfuss are like have shitty attitudes. I'm like, I don't think you can possibly imagine what it's like to be faced with that amount of like like all of the time. Like I would be such
Permanent
an asshole.
hatred.
I actually
for
kind of,
years.
whenever something's expected of me, I actually tend to be very discouraged by that.
Yep.
It's something that I've had to kind of get over with.
I like say it half jokingly, but mostly not jokingly. Like, don't tell me what to do. Anytime someone's like, nope,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, don't tell me what to do. I feel that way all the time. It's something I had to get over with like BookTube is because it's like expected that I'll do chatting with nuts every 2 weeks because I said I would. So it's more me, but like I had to kind of get over that feeling of like dread. It's almost
Put
like
videos
dread.
up whenever the fuck you want. It's a hobby.
Yes,
It's not your life.
Exactly. That's 100% it. And George probably said at some point, I have enough money. This is my new hobby. Like this is just a hobby. It's not I don't have to write to eat anymore. And
my first video in like 3.5 weeks is going up tomorrow. Just because I just like didn't want to make videos. Yeah, money.
The sellout of himself.
I literally stopped monetizing my videos because it's more of a hassle during tax season to add my $400 I made from YouTube than to not do it. So I was just like, fuck it, just turn all this shit off.
Feels on that. I had to like get someone to do my taxes because it was
so annoying.
I was like, what in the world do I do with all this? That's why George hasn't wrote wins because he doesn't want to pay taxes on my
exactly.
Confirmed. Mrs. Duncanthal says it was really nice to hear Liene's and Alex's opinion on as a first-time reader. Yeah.
Well, it's always fun to interact with you guys.
I'm glad you feel that because I'm pretty sure my contribution was like, I don't know what happened. Can you explain it to me?
Liene's contribution was, well, Abercrombie.
You know what you're going to get if you invite me anywhere.
We know. I can't read Kingdoms of Death and then have you tell me how it compares to First Law.
No, mostly when we talk about Sun Eater, I talk about Red Rising. Or Kingdom of Heaven.
Kingdom of Heaven.
I almost brought up Kingdom of Heaven tonight, and then I didn't. You're welcome.
Well, now you did.
It's true. Okay, but seriously, the like Balian's like defense strategy.
Oh my god,
is one of the best parts because it's not like just battle. It's like creative ways to use the landscape and resources to defend a city. That I was like, movies don't focus on this enough. The actual strategies of defending a city. I love that part of Kingdom of Heaven. Okay. That's all. I'm done.
Derry, it wouldn't be one of these streams without me talking about a pink mast. Okay. At least I didn't read the rest of that fucking paragraph.
Yeah, so say he actually saved you a bit. He gave you the highlight. Well, I think that covers all Dunk and Egg, guys. I think we did it. And in somewhat of a timely fashion for us.
Not really.
Well, I mean, I feel like proportionately speaking, spending 2 hours on something this short versus 3.5 on something that's like 3 times longer. This got more attention from us.
I would wager that half of the stream had nothing to do specifically with that.
That's also true of the other streams, though.
That's
so still true.
I feel like Night of the Seven Kingdoms is like comfort food for Song of Ice and Fire fans.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I hope more people read it because I think it has like, they are silly stories, but like they're also rather good and there's some depth there. And it was a lot of fun reading it and talking with you guys about it. I was really excited for this one. Like whenever Alex finished it and he put in our little group chat, he was just like, I could use some more of these. And I'm like, hell yeah, dude. I get it.
It did really seem, good. I mean, like not that.
I don't know what
that
means.
I felt like having only 3 stories in a collection. I was like, it's just 3? Like I thought there'd be like, I don't know, 5?
Yeah, right.
3 is like, that's not enough. It's okay. It's because I'm applying the logic of like video making to it, where I'm like doing like a list of recommendations or read-alikes, and I'm like, I need more than 3. I need at least 5. I can't make a video unless I have 5.
Yeah, that's true.
5 is the magic number.
5 is the magic number. Well, he said he hoped to release the new Dunk and Egg stories in 3s. So maybe he has a couple finished. Who knows? Wishful thinking. Yeah, I doubt it.
He has 1 finished.
Well, everyone, if you're not subscribed to Liene and Alex, please do so. Their channels are down in the description. Liene, thank you again for making the thumbnail. It was wonderful. And Alex and Liene both, thank you for joining me tonight. This has been great. Next is Fire and Blood. Are you guys excited?
For the 10-hour extravaganza, for which we must wear a diaper? Yes.
Whose channel is this one on? Liene?
This will be on Liene's channel where we started this adventure. We're going to dial all the way back to the beginning.
So I guess what we could do is if we end up having to split it, we could just like channel hop until we're done.
Yeah, That's perfect.
Rather than just sign up for like a 6-hour stream, because that would be insane.
1,000 streams in one. Way to tie it back.
The reason that we're going to split this into like a 10-month thing is because none of us wants to actually read Empire of the Vampire. So we're just like, we're going to read Fire and Blood forever now.
Yeah, this is kind of a thing. Like I feel like we have a plan. Like we have Empire of the Vampire, then we're going to do the wolf and the spider and the cuckoo. So there's more Liene, Alex, and Jimmy content coming down the pipe. Keep your peepers peeled.
What?
I don't know. I'm gone.
And I can promise you that you know what will be mentioned in all of those chats. Drop
First law, yeah.
Always relevant.
Of course.
First law and masks that are flesh colored.
That is never relevant, Alex.
Could be.
All right, chat. Well, chat, thank you for being here. We appreciate you. Hit like on the video so people can find it afterwards. It helps out. And we'll see you again next month for some Fire and Blood. So for Lady Liene, Sir Alex, and Sir Jimmy, we hope you're good. We hope you are safe. And until next time, remember to always keep clouding in the air.